Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was working a solo survey job out near the old Cold Springs military testing area, about 20 miles from town. The site was mostly off-limits, fenced off with warning signs, but my company had a contract to map the terrain for some environmental study. I was using my drone to do most of the heavy lifting, flying it over the ridges and valleys, capturing images for stitching into a 3D model later. It was mid-October, dry and clear, but the wind was picking up in the afternoon. I was near the edge of the restricted zone, about 3 miles from the closest road, in this scrubby desert valley with dusty red soil and low juniper trees. The air had that late autumn chill, but the sun was still warm on my neck. I launched the drone around 3:30 p.m., planned a few flight paths, and started monitoring the live feed on my tablet. The drone was a pretty standard model, nothing fancy but reliable enough. I'd flown it hundreds of times before in this kind of terrain. About 20 minutes in, while I was sitting on a rock adjusting the waypoints, the screen flickered. The GPS signal dropped. I shrugged it off at first. This area sometimes has weird dead zones because of the terrain, and there was always a chance of interference from the military's radio towers nearby. The drone was still alive and transmitting video, so I figured it was just a brief glitch. But then the video feed froze, and I lost all control. The drone just hovered there, or so it seemed, and the GPS coordinates stopped updating. I tried every trick I knew: reboot the controller, reset the drone's connection, walk around to find better signal. Nothing worked. For the next hour, I sat there watching the screen go black and then try to reconnect. Nothing. I was getting antsy. It wasn't the first time I'd lost a drone, but usually it landed somewhere or the signal came back. This time, nothing. The sun was starting to dip below the hills, and the wind was stronger now, kicking up dust. I packed up the rest of my gear and started walking back toward the road. The last thing I wanted was to be stranded near that place after dark. I thought maybe I'd just lost the drone for good. When I got back to the truck around 5:15 p.m., I saw the drone sitting on the passenger seat. I hadn't brought it back, obviously. I was certain I'd left it where I launched it. The case was open, like someone had just placed it there. My heart raced for a moment. I checked the drone carefully. No damage, no dirt, nothing. I didn't see how it could have made it back by itself. The battery was about half full. I booted up the tablet and loaded the footage saved to the drone's internal memory. What I saw on the video is what really messed me up. The footage started at the moment the signal dropped, but the camera angle was odd. Instead of the usual sweeping landscape shots, the drone was pointed straight up, focusing on the sky. There was a smooth black shape hovering way up high, almost motionless. No blinking lights, no noise, just this featureless, matte black object. Too high for any drone or plane, and it didn't move. At first I thought maybe it was a bird or a cloud, but the shape was too solid, too uniform, and it stayed perfectly still for the whole clip, like it was watching me. The object stayed in the frame for about 40 minutes. The sun set during the video and the sky darkened to twilight, but the shape didn't change or move. Near the end of the clip, the drone camera slowly tilted down and moved away from the object, as if someone was regaining control. Then, the video cut off. I double-checked the timestamps. The drone had been missing for exactly an hour. I rewatched the footage a dozen times. There was nothing else. No radio chatter, no engine noise, no flashes or lights. Just that black shape against the darkening sky. The feeling I got watching it was hard to explain. It wasn't fear exactly, but an uneasy calm, like staring at something that knows you're watching but doesn't care. I didn't want to share this with anyone at work. They'd laugh it off or say I lost the signal and the drone just drifted. But I know what I saw. The next day, I went back to the launch site to look for any signs of where the drone might have landed or crashed. Nothing. No broken parts, no footprints, no disturbance. The desert there was completely undisturbed, like it had never left my hands. Later, I checked with the local airfield and the military base nearby. No unusual activity reported. I kept the footage, but I haven't shown it to anyone outside a couple of friends who are into this kind of thing. Every now and then, I wonder what that object was, why the drone lost signal right as it appeared, and how it ended up back in my truck without me noticing. I guess some things are better left unexplained. But I still fly drones, and every time I do, I check the sky for that same black shape, even though I know it probably won't be there again. I was out on the back porch of my place in Flagstaff, Arizona, trying to get some shots of the full moon that night. It was early spring, around 10:30 p.m., and the sky was clear except for a thin haze that made the moon look a little soft around the edges. I've been into photography for years, mostly landscapes and night sky stuff, so I had my camera on a tripod aimed up, fiddling with the settings to get the best shot of the craters and shadows. I remember the air being chilly but still calm. No wind, which is perfect for sharp photos. The neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional distant bark of a dog or a car passing on the main road a few blocks away. Nothing unusual at all. I'd taken a few shots looking through the viewfinder when I noticed something odd. Across the moon's surface, there was a small dark shape moving in a perfectly straight line. It zipped across from one edge to the other way too fast to be a bird or any plane. The movement was too direct, almost mechanical, with no deviation or change in speed. I blinked a couple of times, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me or that I caught a smudge on the lens. I didn't see anything moving in the sky with my naked eyes, just the moon, perfectly still. But through the camera, that shape was definitely there, crossing the lunar surface like it was slicing through the shot. I clicked the shutter a few times trying to capture it again, but it didn't show back up. It was only in that one frame. I packed up my gear and went inside, feeling a little weird, but figuring it was probably just a shadow or a speck of dirt on the sensor. The next day, I loaded the photos on my computer and zoomed in. The object was unmistakable, a dark, solid-looking shape moving left to right, sharp edges, no blur. I showed it to my wife, Marissa, but she just shrugged and said it was probably a bug or something caught in the lens. I tried asking my neighbor, Pete, if he'd seen anything unusual that night. He's a night owl and sometimes hangs out on his porch late. He said no, nothing at all, just the moon looking the same as always. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about that photo. I went back out on the porch every night for a week, like setting up my camera and watching the moon, hoping to see the shape again. Nothing. No strange shadows, no fast-moving objects, just the usual craters and dust. One night, a couple of evenings later, I was outside again, this time later, close to midnight. The sky was partly cloudy, and the moon was just a sliver behind the clouds. I was sitting in a chair, sipping some coffee, when I noticed the streetlights flickering. I thought maybe the power was acting up because of some storm moving in, but it was patchy. One light would dim for a second, then come back on. The others stayed steady. That flickering went on for about 5 minutes, slow and random, and then stopped. I looked up toward the hills beyond the neighborhood and saw something I couldn't explain. There was this faint, pulsing glow coming from just past the ridge, a cool bluish light that seemed to hover in place. It didn't move like a plane or helicopter and wasn't bright enough to be a spotlight or flare. I grabbed my camera and aimed toward it, but by the time I got the lens focused, the light was gone. I told Marissa about the light the next morning, but she just said it was probably a reflection from a car or a drone, though she admitted she hadn't noticed anything herself. The weirdest part was that whenever I brought it up with other neighbors, nobody else reported seeing the light or the flickering streetlights. A few nights later, I was inside, editing photos from a different shoot, when my phone went dead suddenly with a low buzzing sound right before it shut off. I plugged it in and saw the battery was full just an hour earlier. The phone wouldn't turn back on for almost 20 minutes. Later that same night, I stepped outside to get some fresh air and noticed a soft humming sound coming from somewhere nearby. It was quiet and constant, almost like distant machinery, but without any identifiable source. I walked toward the sound and saw nothing. No cars, no generators, no lights, just the quiet streets and houses. The next morning, my camera had a tiny scratch on the lens cover that I was sure hadn't been there before. No idea how it got there. I started paying more attention to other little things, too. The clock on the microwave would sometimes blink off for a few seconds. The radio in the car would pick up odd static bursts that didn't match any station. Even my laptop randomly slowed down, like something was interfering with it, but antivirus scans showed nothing. The strangest moment came about 10 days after that first photo. I was out on the porch again, watching the moon through my camera. The moon was about half full, bright and sharp. I noticed the same shape from before, a dark, thin object crossing the moon's surface again, moving fast, perfectly straight. Only this time, it seemed even closer, more defined. I called Marissa out to look, but she didn't see it. I asked Pete, but he just laughed it off, saying I probably needed new glasses. I kept snapping pictures, and the object crossed the frame 3 times that night, always at the same speed and angle. The night after that, I left my camera running on a time-lapse setting, expecting to catch the object again. When I reviewed the footage, the moon moved across the sky normally. No strange shapes or shadows crossing it. Nothing. I don't know what I saw in those photos or that one time out there on the porch. No one else ever saw the object or the strange lights or heard the humming. I kept looking, kept waiting for answers. But the more I tried to explain it, the less sense it made. Eventually, I stopped going out with the camera at night. Sometimes I still check those old photos on my computer and wonder if what I saw was just a trick of light or some glitch. But I can't explain what was crossing the moon that night, or why no one else saw it. I was hiking alone one afternoon near an old military testing ground out by Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. The place is huge, mostly desert and scrub, fenced off in parts, but with some unofficial trails that locals use. I'd heard some weird stories about the area, strange lights, odd sounds, but I wasn't there to chase myths. I just wanted to get away from everything for a day. No phone, no noise, just the sun and the sand. I started out around noon, parking my truck on this dusty dirt road that led to a flat stretch of desert with a few scattered hills. The sky was clear, the heat was dry but not brutal yet, maybe early September. I wore a hat, some boots, and had my day pack with water and a little first aid kit. The trail wasn't marked officially. I was following footprints in the sand that looked like someone had passed through recently. About 2 hours in, I noticed something odd on the ground just ahead. At first, it looked like a piece of scrap metal half buried in the sand. As I got closer, I saw it was a wristwatch. But this wasn't any watch you'd find at a gas station or even a decent outdoor store. The case was warped and half melted, like it'd been exposed to extreme heat or something corrosive. The glass face was cracked, but the hands were still moving, ticking away like nothing had happened. I crouched and picked it up, surprised it was still running. The second hand moved steadily. Even though the whole thing looked like it had been through a fire or blast, it felt heavy and oddly warm in my hand. I flipped it over. No brand, no model number, just some scratched off markings. That's when I noticed the footprints around it. They weren't my own, obviously. They looked fresh, but stopped abruptly maybe 10 feet away, just in the middle of the open sand with no sign of where the person could have gone. No trail leading off, no drag marks, no disturbance in the dirt that made sense. I looked around, scanning the area, but it was just open desert, stretching out in all directions. No buildings, no vehicles, no other people. The wind was still, no birds, no animals stirring. The silence was off, like the desert itself was holding its breath. I tried calling out, but my voice sounded too loud, too sharp in the empty space. Nothing answered. I slipped the watch into my pocket and started walking toward where the footprints had vanished. I wanted to see if I'd missed something. A hidden path, maybe a vehicle, or a cave. But there was nothing. Just sand and rocks, stretching out without a single sign of a person or animal. I kept walking, the weird feeling growing heavier. It was like someone was watching, but I never saw anything. No movement, no sound. My skin prickled. After a while, I sat down on a rock to catch my breath. The sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, and the temperature dropped quickly in the desert air. I pulled the watch out again. It was still ticking, and I swear the hands were moving faster than normal, like they were trying to catch up with something. That night, I camped nearby. I set up my sleeping bag and stove, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept glancing toward the spot where I found the watch. The desert had gone quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just this weird stillness that wrapped around me like a shroud. Around midnight, I woke up because my phone flickered on by itself. I don't know how it happened. The battery had been dead hours ago. The screen lit up with a bright white glow, but there was no message, no notification. Just the screen on, shining in the dark tent. I reached over to turn it off, but before I could, it went black again. That was when I heard it. A low hum, like a distant engine idling, but with no direction. It wasn't the wind or an animal. It felt like it was coming from the ground beneath me. I stepped out of the tent, heart beating faster, and looked around. Nothing moved, no lights, no shadows, just the desert and stars. The hum stopped suddenly, like someone hit mute. The next morning, I packed up quickly and headed back the way I came. When I got near the spot where the footprints stopped, I noticed something else. There were faint marks in the sand, like something had been dragged carefully but slowly, heading straight down into the ground. I knelt and traced my fingers over the shallow gouges. They were definitely fresh, but the sand was dry and loose, so they should have shifted or blown away in the night. They hadn't. I pocketed the watch again, and this time it felt cooler. The ticking slowed down to a regular pace, like normal. On the drive home, I kept turning the watch over in my hand. I tried to make sense of it. How a watch could melt and still work, why the footprints stopped without explanation, why the night felt so wrong. At home, I left the watch on the kitchen table for a day or two, but it kept me awake at night. The second hand sometimes seemed to skip or move backward for a moment. I checked online for anything like it, but found nothing. Eventually, I put the watch away in a box of old camping gear. I didn't want to lose it, but I didn't want to stare at it anymore either. I still think about that day. How something unexplainable can just be sitting there in the dirt, waiting to be found. And how a simple object like a watch can hold a silence deeper than the desert itself. I was hauling a load of PVC pipe from Boise to Redding back in early March. Cold, but clear. I'd left late, around 7 p.m., figuring I'd run until about midnight and grab a few hours off Highway 139. That stretch through Modoc County's mostly empty, pine forest, dry grass, lots of cattle fencing. Quiet place to stop if you need a break and don't want to shell out for a truck stop. I'd pulled off on a wide gravel shoulder just south of Tianesta, where there's a little pullout by a bend in the road. Not official parking, but I'd stopped there before. No signs, no traffic at that hour. I remember checking the time, 12:13 a.m., and logging it in the ELD. I parked facing south, put the brake on, killed the engine, and climbed into the sleeper. No weird feelings or anything. Just tired. I'd had a protein bar, put on a podcast, and passed out fast. Next thing I know, I'm awake, sitting up in the sleeper like I just heard something. I didn't hear anything specific, but I felt something. Can't explain that part real well, like my body noticed something before my brain did. That off kind of quiet. The cab was dark, but the little red light from the dash clock said 3:12 a.m. I sat there a second, listening. No wind, no traffic, not even a bug tapping the windshield. Just still, too still. I opened the curtain, climbed up front, and turned on the dome light. Nothing looked off. My keys were still in the little tray where I keep them. Nothing had shifted. It was cold, but not freezing. I turned off the light and opened the driver's side door. That's when I noticed the angle. The rig was tilted slightly left. Not a ton, just enough to notice if you've been driving a long time. My rig's old, but I keep it balanced. That shoulder had been flat when I parked. I remember because I double-checked the level before I went down. I stepped out and looked around. Something was wrong. The gravel under the front tires looked fresh. Not like fresh poured, but like it had just been disturbed. Darker patches where the tires were, like the weight had been shifted onto new ground. And when I looked behind the trailer, the back end was angled differently than before. The whole rig was maybe 20, 30 feet farther from the road than I remembered. Not in a new spot entirely, just nudged back into the brush a little. I walked around the passenger side, checked the area. No tire marks, no drag, no footprints. But right behind the rear wheels, maybe 6 feet back, were two deep indentations in the gravel. Not gouges, not tire tracks, just smooth, symmetrical depressions, maybe a foot across, shaped kind of like ovals. About 6 inches deep, no pattern in the bottom, just smooth. They didn't match my tires, didn't match any tires I've ever seen. I stood there a long time trying to think how that could have happened. Maybe someone hooked the rig and towed it back, but there were no tracks. And who would move a truck 30 feet backwards into brush in the middle of the night? I checked the trailer seals, still locked, still secure. Checked the brake lines, lights, coupler. Everything looked fine. Nothing missing. I walked out toward the road to look at where I thought I'd parked, and that's when I noticed the spot I'd originally pulled into. Flat, compacted gravel with a shallow tire groove. It was closer to the white line by about 30 feet. No mistaking it. I'd been there, and now I wasn't. The new position had no matching tire tracks leading to it. The gravel all around was untouched, except those two oval indentations behind the rig. Everything else, brush, weeds, even a soda can off to the side, hadn't moved. I'm not the jumpy type, but I felt something crawling up my spine. The back of my head felt hot. I remember looking around the trees and seeing nothing but dark shapes, barely visible under the starlight. No sound. No breeze. That was the part that got me, I think. How quiet it was. No animals. No night sounds. Just dead silence and my own breath fogging in the cold. I didn't want to stay there. I climbed back in, started the engine, and eased back toward the road. I remember the gravel feeling softer under the tires than it should have, like it hadn't been driven on recently. I didn't punch it or anything, just moved slow, trying not to panic. Once I was back on the highway, I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see someone or something in the brush. But there was nothing, just the red glow of my taillights. About 10 miles down, I pulled into a small rest area and got out again. This time, I checked the undercarriage, the fuel tank, everywhere. No damage, no signs of tampering. Even the oval indentations were gone. They hadn't left any kind of residue or marks on the tires. That's what stuck with me. If something did move the rig, how did it leave no evidence except those marks? No toe, no lift indentations, no shifted suspension. I made it to Redding by early afternoon and dropped the load. Didn't mention anything to dispatch. Figured maybe I'd parked wrong, misremembered the spot, whatever. But I kept thinking about the gravel, how it had felt different underfoot, like it had just been set down. That stretch of road isn't used much at night. Not a lot of cameras, no signal most of the way. If someone was out there, they weren't local, and they weren't driving anything I've ever seen. I still pass that spot sometimes, and I always check it. I even marked the milepost on a sticky note in the dash. But I've never seen those indentations again. We were camping out near the Black Rock Desert, just a couple hours north of Reno. It was late August, hot during the day, but the kind of dry heat that doesn't stick to you. At night, it cooled off fast, and you'd want a hoodie by the fire. Me, my wife Heather, and our two kids, Ellie and Josh. We'd taken a week off and figured we'd try something more remote, away from the usual KOAs and crowded parks. We found a flat spot near the edge of a dry lake bed. Not quite on the playa, but close enough to walk out and watch the stars without light pollution. No cell service, no other campers for miles. Closest paved road was a good 40 minutes away. We set up camp in a little sandy dip with some sagebrush on the perimeter. Brought a 6-person dome tent, 2 folding tables, and a pop-up shade we anchored down with rocks. The kids had their own little sleeping bags, and we all crashed in the same tent. The first few nights were perfect. Big sky, quiet evenings, maybe the occasional coyote in the distance, but nothing close. We cooked on the camp stove, roasted marshmallows, played cards, the usual. It was the kind of trip where you stop checking your phone for the time and just move with the daylight. What I remember most about the third night was the wind. It had picked up just after dinner. Not strong enough to wreck the tent, but enough that the walls flexed a little, and we had to tighten the guy lines before bed. The sound of it rushing over the lake bed was strange, too. It wasn't loud exactly, just steady, like white noise, but lower pitched. Constant, almost like a hum. I figured it was the terrain. Big flat surfaces make weird acoustics. We zipped in for the night a little after 10. Heather and I laid in the middle, kids on either side. The lantern was off. Stars were visible through the mesh above. I remember looking at my watch before I drifted off. It said 10:17. That detail stuck with me for some reason. Next thing I knew, I was awake. Not startled awake, just suddenly not asleep. My eyes opened, and it felt like I hadn't been out for more than a minute or two. No grogginess, no stiffness, just up. Heather was still asleep. So were the kids. Everything inside the tent looked normal. The lantern was where I left it. No signs anyone had moved. But something felt off. I sat up and looked around. That's when I realized the tent zipper, the main door, was fully closed. Not just zipped shut, but the little pull tabs were tucked outside. From inside, you couldn't open it without reaching through the mesh sleeve and fishing the zipper handle in. And that's not how we'd left it. We always zipped it up from the inside before bed. My first thought was wind. Maybe it flipped the flaps or something. But the wind had completely stopped. No sound, no movement, just dead still. I reached for my watch, which I'd set next to my sleeping bag. It said 2:46 a.m. I frowned. That didn't feel right. I had that weird sense that it was earlier than that, like maybe 12:30 or 1. I picked up the lantern and turned it on, just a soft glow. Heather stirred and asked what was wrong. I said I wasn't sure, just that something felt weird. She sat up too and reached for her wristwatch from her bag pocket. Same thing, 2:46 a.m. exactly. Not 2:44, not 2:48, exactly. I remember looking at her and saying, "Is that what yours says?" We both leaned over and checked Ellie's and Josh's watches, which we'd set on the gear bag between them so we wouldn't step on them. Same time. 2:46. All four, even though we'd bought them at different times, different brands. That's when I noticed something else. There were faint impressions in the dust near the tent entrance. Not footprints exactly, more like shallow scuffs, like someone had walked through in socks or soft shoes. They weren't ours. We'd all been barefoot in the tent, and they were too small for my feet, too big for Ellie's. Just off. I pulled the zipper in and opened the flap. Outside, the moon was low and orange. Visibility was decent. Enough to see the scrub brush around the camp, the tables, the fire pit. But there was something about the light that felt wrong, like it was too flat. Shadows weren't where they should be. I looked at our camp stove and couldn't see a shadow behind it. I moved my hand in front of the tent. Nothing, no shadow on the ground. That hit me in the gut. Heather came out after me, whispering to keep her voice down so the kids didn't wake. She saw it too. No shadows, even though the moon was out and bright. She said, "Do you hear that?" I listened. Nothing. Not wind, not bugs, not even our cooler creaking or the distant yip of coyotes like the previous nights. Just total silence. I looked out toward the lake bed, past the brush. There was a glow, faint. Not on the ground, but above it, maybe 20 feet up, a hazy light like the kind you'd see over a stadium, except there was no source, no beam, just the light itself. Pale and steady, maybe the size of a car hood, floating still above the playa. I didn't point at it. I didn't say anything. Heather grabbed my wrist. I think she saw it too. We stood there for a long time. I had this overwhelming sense that we weren't supposed to move. Not like we were frozen, we just knew not to. It was instinct. Like the kind you get when a big animal is nearby in the dark, and your body knows before your brain does. After maybe 5 minutes, though I can't be sure of the time, the glow dimmed. Not all at once, just slowly faded until it was gone. A second later, the wind came back. Fast. Like someone had unpaused it. It rushed across the tent, kicked dust against our legs. The brush moved again. We both flinched. That seemed to break the spell. We went back inside, zipped the tent up from the inside this time, and sat there in silence. I checked my watch again. Still 2:46. Eventually, I laid back down and stared up through the mesh. The stars looked normal again. In the morning, everything looked untouched. Camp was fine. No signs of animals. No tracks around the perimeter. But all four of our watches had stopped at the same time. Still said 2:46, even though the sun was already up. We tapped them, reset them, changed batteries. Nothing. They were just dead. Heather didn't want to talk about it. The kids never woke up during any of it, and we didn't tell them. We left that afternoon instead of staying another night. Um, Packed up early and didn't say much on the drive back. I still have that watch in a drawer somewhere. It's never worked again. I was driving east on Route 190, cutting through the Mojave, sometime past 11 p.m. It was mid-August, and even at night, the air felt dry and warm through the crack in the driver's window. I'd left Ridgecrest earlier that night, heading toward Pahrump, where my cousin Kyle lived. I was just planning to crash at his place for a day or two before heading into Vegas. That stretch of road is dead empty. No lights, no towns, barely even any signs. You just pass through scattered Joshua trees and hills that fade into black. I was maybe an hour past Trona, not a single car in either direction for miles. I hadn't seen headlights in maybe 30 minutes. The radio had gone static ages ago. It was sometime around 11:40 when I saw the first flash. Off to the right, far out, almost at the horizon, a bright white light lit up the low hills for a second and then vanished. No sound. Just this sudden, solid flash that lit the desert like lightning, but without the flicker. It looked artificial, not like lightning or heat lightning, more like the flash from a giant camera, if that makes sense. Too steady, too precise. At the exact same moment it flashed, my headlights dimmed, only for a beat, like someone lowered a dimmer switch, and then came right back to normal. I actually said, "What the hell?" out loud and sat up straighter. The battery light didn't come on, and the engine didn't stutter. I watched the dash. Everything looked fine. Maybe just a voltage dip or something, I thought. Old car. I drive a 2011 Civic, so it's not exactly brand new. About 3 minutes later, another flash. Same spot, same silent brightness lighting up the desert scrub. My headlights dimmed again, in perfect sync. Not a second before or after, exactly when that light popped. Like they were tied together. That's when I started getting nervous. I flicked the headlights off and on again. No change. I slowed down a little. I was doing about 70, dropped it to 55. I glanced at my phone, but I had no service. The little SOS only popped up where the bars should have been. I kept watching the right side of the road where the light had come from. There was nothing but dark hills and low desert brush. No towers, no buildings. Nothing out there. Then it happened a third time. Same white flash. Maybe a little closer? I couldn't tell. Just this sudden, perfect rectangle of brightness along the horizon, and again, my headlights dimmed with it like someone was flipping a switch. No thunder. No hum. No feeling in the air. Just the flash and the dimming. I was fully creeped out by that point. My arms were tight on the wheel, knuckles stiff. I looked in the rearview mirror and didn't see anything behind me. But I slowed more, dropped to maybe 40, which felt way too slow for that road, but I couldn't keep going like nothing was happening. About a mile later, I pulled off the road. There's no shoulder really, just dirt. I parked just enough off the asphalt that I wouldn't get clipped by some semi if one ever came through. I turned off the engine, left the parking lights on. I sat there with my window down, listening. It was dead quiet. No crickets, no wind. Just the sound of the engine ticking as it cooled down. Then, another flash. Same direction, same brightness. But this time, from inside the car, I felt something, like a small thump in the air. Not in the ground, in my chest, like a subtle pressure shift. My headlights weren't even on now, but the parking lights blinked. I swear they flickered for just a fraction of a second during the flash. I turned off all the lights and stepped out of the car. The air was warm, but weirdly still. No breeze, not even the usual desert whisper in your ears. I walked around to the passenger side and leaned on the hood, watching the hills where the light had come from. I couldn't see any source, no glow, just flat dark. I waited maybe 10 minutes. Nothing happened. I was starting to feel dumb, like maybe it was some military thing, maybe even just lightning, despite the clear sky. Then a different light appeared. Not a flash, this was more like a soft pulse. Higher up this time, in the sky. It blinked on for about a second, a soft, white glow like a dying LED, then off. It came back about 10 seconds later in a different part of the sky. Still silent, still weirdly round, not like a strobe or aircraft beacon. I kept watching. Another pulse, higher now. It blinked, moved a bit, blinked again, like it was jumping locations. Always the same soft light. No tail, no streak. Just on, off, on, but never in the same place. I backed toward the driver's door and got in the car. Left it off. Just sat there, door open, eyes on the sky. I don't know how long I sat like that. Maybe 15 minutes? The pulses stopped at some point, and I didn't see another flash like before. But when I finally turned the engine back on and looked at the dash clock, it said 1:12. I know for a fact I pulled over just after midnight, 11:50 something, when the first flash happened. I remember the number because I thought I'd reach Pahrump around 1. The drive should have been another hour from where I stopped. But now, with the clock showing 1:12, that meant I'd been sitting there for over an hour, which didn't make sense. I hadn't dozed off. I wasn't tired. I'd only had my eyes off the clock for maybe half an hour, tops. But somehow, that extra time was just gone. I drove the rest of the way without stopping. No more flashes, no more pulses, but I kept checking the rearview mirror constantly. The back of my neck felt tight the whole way, like I was being watched. When I got to Kyle's place, I didn't mention any of it. We stayed up drinking and watching reruns, and I just let it sit in my head. I did check my headlights the next morning. Nothing wrong with them. Battery was fine too. The weirdest part? The dash clock stayed exactly synced with my phone the rest of the trip. Never gained or lost a second. It was late September when I took the Cessna up from Red Bluff. I'd been flying since college, nothing fancy, just small single-engine stuff, mostly for weekend trips or clearing my head. That Sunday I had the afternoon free, weather looked good, and I figured I'd take a short hop up north over the valley before sunset. Clear skies, light wind, visibility for miles. I filed VFR, took off around 4:40 p.m., just a quick loop, Red Bluff to Lake Shasta and back. Nothing unusual. About 30 minutes in, I was cruising at 6,500 feet, just west of Lassen. Air was smooth. Not much traffic on the radio. I was listening to NorCal Approach in case anyone was nearby, but the chatter was light. The sun was low but still above the tree line, lighting up the clouds from underneath in that soft orange way it does in late summer. That's when I noticed something above me, maybe a few hundred feet higher. Looked like another aircraft, coming up from behind, just slightly offset to my left. At first I thought it was a twin, maybe a Baron or a Piper Navajo, something with a narrow fuselage. Hard to tell with the sun behind it. But what caught my attention was the way it was flying. It wasn't passing me, it was pacing me. I slowed a bit, brought the throttle back just to see, and whatever it was adjusted with me, kept the exact same relative distance. Not gaining, not falling back, just hovering up there. Maybe 500 feet higher, maybe less. I couldn't hear anything over my own engine, but it wasn't making any noise that I could detect. I called it out on the radio. Unidentified traffic, 11 o'clock high, type unknown, altitude unverified. No response. No acknowledgement from ATC or anyone on frequency. I looked up again. The shape was still there. Silhouette was weird. It didn't have visible wings, not like a fixed wing should. The body looked smooth, almost like it was molded. No rivets, no joints. And the way it was flying didn't make sense. No attitude change, no roll. Just this perfect horizontal movement, matching me inch for inch. I kept watching it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't wobbling, no yaw, no buffeting from turbulence. Just solid. Almost too solid. I tried to get a better angle, banked gently right, thinking maybe the sun was tricking my eyes. But as I turned, it shifted too. Same bank, same arc, staying high and left. Perfectly mirrored. That's when I started to feel it. Something was wrong. Not with the plane. Instruments were solid, engine was fine, but there was this pressure, like cabin pressure dropping even though I wasn't climbing. My ears popped once, then again, even though my altitude hadn't changed more than 50 feet. And the radio started hissing. Not loud, just a soft static under the squelch, even when I turned the volume down. I looked up again. That's when it flipped. It didn't bank, it didn't roll, it just rotated. 1 second it was level above me, matching my heading. The next, it pivoted, nose down, tail up, but stayed perfectly still in space, like gravity didn't apply. It wasn't falling, it wasn't climbing, just standing on its tail in midair. And then it vanished. No sound, no acceleration, no vapor trail, just gone. I scanned the sky, turned in a wide circle, even climbed another 300 feet to look for anything. Contrail, reflection, movement. Nothing. Just clouds above the orange sun and a completely empty sky. I keyed up again. NorCal approach? This is November 289er Echo. I had visual contact with unknown traffic at approximately 700 feet, positioned southwest of Lassen, faded out of sight. No collision risk. Continuing VFR. They didn't respond right away. About 10 seconds later, a different controller voice came on and asked me to repeat. I did. They told me they had no primary or secondary radar contact in my area other than me. I continued the loop back, tried to brush it off. But on the way down, I kept checking the mirrors, kept glancing out the side windows, expecting something else to appear. I couldn't get the movement out of my head, how unnatural it had looked when it flipped. It wasn't aerodynamic. It wasn't possible, not by any standard I knew. I landed around 6:10 p.m., still light out. Parked, tied down, logged the flight. Normal flight time, no mechanical issues. Nothing technically happened, so I didn't file a report. I didn't even tell anyone about it for a few days. But for weeks afterward, every time I went up, I kept scanning the sky for something following me. And I kept thinking about how that thing knew exactly where I was. How it mimicked every little turn, every small speed change. Like it wasn't flying near me. Like it was watching. I was managing the night shift at Red Bluff Storage just outside of Amarillo when this happened. It's a 24-hour place, gated, but I'm usually the only one on site after 10 p.m. We've got about 150 units, chain link perimeter fence, and 4 camera feeds, 2 on the gate, 1 on the back row near the larger units, and 1 on the office. Nothing fancy, but it does the job. It was early March, cold and clear that night. I remember because I had my little space heater going under the desk and the wind kept rattling the siding. The night had been uneventful up to that point. A guy named Troy had come by around 11 to grab some tools out of his unit, which wasn't unusual. He runs some kind of handyman business and works odd hours. After that, just silence. At 2:14 a.m. on the dot, the monitors all blinked. Not glitched, exactly. They sort of popped, like when you change HDMI channels and the signal cuts for a second. Just a quick flash of static across all 4 feeds, maybe half a second, and then they came right back. I frowned at it, but didn't think much of it right away. The power didn't go out. My computer stayed on, the lights were fine. I figured it was just a hiccup in the DVR. I marked the time on my little notepad in case I had to check it later. A couple minutes later, I noticed something weird on the back row camera. That feed faces the far lot where we keep the larger boat and RV units. It's motion triggered at night, but it had just flipped over to full record and was still. No cars, no people, no wind kicking up dust. Just this wide shot of the back fence and a few rows of corrugated metal doors. But something about the lighting looked off. The back rows lit by a tall sodium lamp, same kind as the others, but everything looked dimmer, like there was something over the camera. Not directly in front of it, but above it. The shadows were wrong, too soft, spread out weird. I leaned in closer and even turned off my desk lamp so I could get a better look. You ever seen one of those old war documentaries where a blimp passes overhead and everything just fades into shade for a few seconds? That's what it reminded me of, like something big was hovering over the lot and blocking out the light, but doing it gently, like it was diffusing it, not casting a sharp shadow. I stepped outside the office to see if something had messed with the pole light. The air was sharp, real dry. Sky was totally clear. I walked around the side of the building, stood under the lamp, looked up. Nothing. No sound, no movement. I looked back across the lot toward the fence. Everything looked normal. The light looked fine from out there. I was only outside for maybe 2 minutes. And when I came back in and checked the feed again, everything looked normal again. I figured I'd maybe just spook myself. But I made a note of the time again and flagged the recording to review later. I didn't actually go back and pull the footage until the following afternoon. I'd stayed late that night, so I didn't get around to reviewing the flagged section until the next shift. The manager on days, Dana, was the one who actually hit play while I was logging reports from the previous night. She called me over almost immediately. "Look at this," she said. We rolled the footage back to 2:13:45 a.m. You see the normal lot view. Then, right at 2:14, there's this sharp white flash. Not like lightning, more like a camera flash going off right next to the lens. Bright enough that the whole screen whites out for a frame or two. And then this part gives me a weird feeling even now. You see a shadow move across the camera. It's not shaped like anything I can explain. It's not a bird, it's not a drone. It moves too smooth. It just drifts across, fast but not in a hurry, like it's coasting on a current. It's got no visible edges, just this huge, misshapen blur that glides from one corner of the frame to the other in maybe 3 seconds. The way it moved reminded me of watching a stingray underwater. The most unnerving part is that nothing on the lot reacts. No wind, no rattle, no power disruption, and there's no sound on those feeds, but the dust on the gravel doesn't even kick up. It's just this shadow, massive, and then it's gone. Dana and I just sat there for a while watching it loop. She kept saying, "That's not a plane. That's not a plane." We checked the other camera office, caught the flash too, reflected faintly on the metal siding. The gate cams didn't show much. They were facing the wrong direction, but they both blinked at the same time. I reported it up the chain like I was supposed to. Corporate didn't say much, just told me to save the clip, back it up, and write a report. Later that week, I talked to Troy, the handyman guy. I asked if he noticed anything weird that night. He said no, but then he paused and said, "Well, my truck clock was off when I left. Said it was 2:41 when I pulled out, but my phone said 2:34. I thought it was just the cold messing with the battery." That struck me because I'd seen him leave on the feed right after the flash, like right after. And the whole time thing didn't match up exactly. 7 minutes isn't much, but still. That section of the feed is still saved in our backup, but when we tried to export it to a thumb drive, the file came out corrupted. We tried twice. Played fine on the internal system, but wouldn't transfer. Dana gave up. I didn't. I kept watching that clip for weeks. Nothing changed. No glitches, no cuts, just a flash and a shadow that shouldn't have been there. I still work nights. I still check the back row camera more than I need to. I haven't seen anything like it again, but I've had other flashes. Not as bright and no shadows, but once in a while, at almost the same time of night, the cameras blink again, and every time they do, I step outside and look up, just to check. I was driving back from Flagstaff to Kingman late one night in October. My cousin's kid had a birthday, and I stuck around longer than I meant to. Helped clean up, talked to my uncle for a while. By the time I left, it was almost 11. The drive's a little under 2 hours if you're moving mostly I-40 through the desert, not much traffic. I've done it 100 times. I wasn't in a rush. Weather was dry, cool, moon was out, but not full. My truck's got a Dashcam, one of those UFO ones with front and rear views, records in loops. I only installed it a few months earlier after some guy ran a red light and tried to blame me. Now it just runs whenever the ignition's on. Nothing felt strange during the drive. It was quiet. I passed 2 semis between Seligman and Ash Fork, but otherwise I was mostly alone on the road. I had an audiobook playing, some old Raymond Chandler novel, and a Gatorade in the cup holder. It wasn't until I got home that I noticed anything weird. I park in the driveway, kill the engine, and gather my stuff from the passenger seat. I always glance at the dash cam when I shut off the truck. It's just habit now. But this time, the screen was frozen. It should have shown a goodbye message and then powered down. Instead, the screen was still on, stuck on a single frame. Black road, stars overhead, timestamp reading 12:38:11. But my truck's clock said 12:40. That bugged me. The camera syncs its time with the GPS, so it should have matched the truck's clock, which I just set that morning. I tapped the screen. It stayed frozen. I unplugged it, then plugged it back in. It rebooted normally, started recording again. Nothing looked damaged. Inside, I dumped my stuff and plugged the SD card into my laptop to check the files. They save in 3-minute chunks. I found the last full clip, ending at 12:38, then the partial one, the one that froze. That file was weird. It was only 2 seconds long, just 2 seconds instead of 3 minutes. I opened it, It starts with a normal view, dark highway, center lines stretching out, desert brush on both sides, stars all over the sky, no other headlights. Then, on the very last frame before the video ends, everything goes black. Not the road, not just the dash cam cutting off. I mean, the sky goes black. The stars blink out, just for that one frame. I checked it again, frame by frame. I used VLC and then a video editor just to be sure I wasn't missing something. In every frame before that, the sky is crystal clear. Dozens of stars, no clouds. Then on the last frame, no stars, not a single one. Still the same desert, same road, same truck interior, just stars. Then, nothing. The next file starts at 12:41, like the clock jumped ahead 2 minutes. And that clip picks up like nothing happened. Same stretch of highway, still no other cars. Stars are back. I checked the truck's GPS log too. That's how I really knew something was off. According to the GPS, I traveled exactly 0.1 miles during that gap. Not a huge distance, about 500 feet. But the speed listed was 0, like I wasn't moving. Like the GPS lost signal and then picked me up again slightly ahead with no record of motion in between. It didn't make sense. The rest of the drive looked normal. No missing footage, no glitches. I rewatched everything leading up to the gap, hoping maybe I'd notice something I missed the first time. Lights, reflections, weird shadows. But there's nothing. Except, okay, this part's hard to explain. In the 2 clips before the gap, there's this shimmer. I didn't see it when I was driving, but it shows up on the video. Around 12:35, in the upper right corner of the front camera, there's this faint movement, like heat distortion, almost. But it's not over the hood or road, it's in the sky. It's small, maybe the size of my thumb on the screen. It sort of wobbles in place, you know, when you're filming through a dirty wind window and a bug crawls across it out of focus. It reminded me of that. Only it's not on the lens, it's up there. The shimmer moves slightly over the next few minutes, maybe a few degrees to the left, and then it's gone. The stars behind it don't shift or change, but when that shimmer passes over them, they seem to blur, like something semi-transparent passed between the camera and the sky. That was around 12:37. The blackout happened at 12:38. I checked the rear cam too. At first, I didn't notice anything, but right around that same time, there's a single frame, just one, where a faint glow appears at the top center of the rear camera's view, like a wide arc of light, almost halo-shaped. It doesn't match any taillights or headlights. It's not bright, more like a faint smudge, but it's there. And then it's gone. I didn't tell anyone for a couple days. I wasn't sure what to even say. Eventually, I showed my neighbor Danny. He used to work for ADOT. He watches a lot of weird sky videos, so I figured if anyone would have an idea, it'd be him. He watched it all. Didn't say much. Just asked me, "Did you feel anything when it happened?" I told him no. I didn't even notice anything on the drive. No sound, no lights, no static or dropouts on the radio. My audiobook never cut. No sign I lost time until I saw the dash cam. That's what bothers me the most. There's no moment I can point to where something felt off. I've driven that road at night plenty of times. I've been through dust storms and seen weird flashes from testing ranges off in the distance. This wasn't like that. I tried to upload the clip to a forum I use for car tech stuff, but the file wouldn't load properly. When I compressed it, the last frame, the blackout one, turned into corrupted green static. When I tried again using a screen recorder, that frame came out solid black, like it had been cut. The original still plays fine on my laptop, though. I saved it to a couple different drives just in case. Every now and then I play it back, frame by frame. There's nothing new to find. The stars blink out, then they come back, and I was just driving. My name's Aaron Klee. I'm 62 now. Used to work radar maintenance for the Air Force out at Clear. That's the big radar station up near Anderson, Alaska. I was stationed there off and on from 95 to 2017, last 3 years as civilian support. I've lived up here almost my whole life. Never had much reason to leave. I only bring that up because everyone always asks the same thing when they see how I live now. Why I lock my truck every time I park it, even in my own driveway, or why I don't go outside after dark unless I absolutely have to. It's not paranoia. I don't think something's gonna jump out of the woods and grab me. It's more like I just don't feel right out there anymore. Not since that last week at Clear. It was October 2017 when I gave my notice. My wife was already retired and we wanted to move closer to Fairbanks, spend more time with the grandkids. I had 2 weeks left to finish out, mostly doing equipment checks and closing out open service logs. The station's out in the middle of nowhere, just a huge radar dome, some support buildings, and endless tundra. Gets cold fast that time of year. Long nights, short days. That last week, the sun wasn't rising until after 9 and it was dark again by 5. I worked swing shift 2 to 10 p.m. There were 3 of us on my crew. Me, a guy named Marquez, and a new kid named Dwyer who transferred up from Offutt. We handled maintenance on the transmitter systems and monitored diagnostics from the command building. It was Tuesday when things started getting strange. Marquez and I were in the power control room checking over some battery arrays. Around 7:30, everything flickered. Not just the lights, the whole system. For half a second, every screen, every panel, even the fluorescence above us dimmed like there was a brownout. Then, everything came back online like nothing happened. We checked the logs, no power dip recorded. Backup systems hadn't kicked in. I called the operations desk and asked if they'd noticed anything. They hadn't, said everything was green. I chalked it up to a software hiccup and moved on. Until it happened again. Same thing, short flicker, maybe a second long, only this time, one of the radar diagnostic panels froze and had to be manually rebooted. That was maybe 20 minutes later. Marquez and I both saw it. Neither of us said much, just looked at each other and got to work. You don't make a fuss in that place unless you have to. But we logged both events, time-stamped, and noted the lack of system alerts. The next night, Wednesday, I was out by the east dish panel just after 9, running a routine physical check. You have to go outside to reach that section. I had my parka on, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other. I got maybe 20 yards from the structure when I noticed something in the snow. Not fresh snow, it had only dusted lightly that day, but the ice was still soft enough to take prints. And there were tracks, not boot prints. Something else. They were long and narrow, with a curve to them, almost like 2 elongated commas side by side. I leaned down to get a better look. The shape wasn't right for any animal I'd seen up here. Not moose, not fox, not rabbit. And they weren't sunken deep, just shallow depressions in a tight zigzag line, almost perfectly spaced. They led around the corner of the structure out of my line of sight. I didn't follow them. I don't know why. I just didn't want to. I finished the inspection and got back inside without mentioning it. Thursday, we lost camera feeds. Not all of them. Just 2 exterior cams, one facing the northeast field and one mounted on the old tower that hadn't been used in years. Both went black around 6:42 p.m., within a second of each other. The weird part, they didn't go offline, they just stopped recording. No static, no disconnect. The feed continued, just black, like they were still functioning, just not seeing anything. Marquez and I tried to reset them remotely. No change. So we sent Dwyer out to take a look physically. Kid suited up and headed out with a radio and flashlight. He was gone 10 minutes. When he came back, he looked off. Said both cameras were fine, no frost, no damage, no obstruction. He said the lenses were clean as hell, which I remember because he repeated it twice like he couldn't make sense of it. He also said he didn't hear anything while he was out there. No wind, no equipment hum, dead quiet. That night I barely slept. My wife asked what was wrong, and I told her I was just stressed about wrapping things up. That wasn't it, but I didn't have the words for what was bothering me. It felt like something was wrong with the air itself. Like it wasn't just quiet outside, but hollow. Friday was my last shift. I almost didn't go in. Thought about calling out, claiming I was sick, but I didn't want to go out like that. So I drove up there one more time. It was already dark by the time I parked. I sat in the truck for a while, watching the sky. I don't know what I was looking for. There was nothing unusual. Just stars. Same stars I'd seen 100 times up there. Inside, things were quiet. Marquez wasn't in yet. Dwyer was in the diagnostic room watching the monitors. He nodded when I came in, but didn't say anything. I walked over and glanced at the screens. That's when I saw it. One of the live feeds, not the ones that went black earlier in the week, showed a faint flicker of light, not from the station. This was out in the field beyond the fencing, a dull white pulse. not steady. It blinked twice, paused, then again, like a rhythm. No movement, no source. Just this slow flash against the snow. I leaned closer. It stopped. I asked Dwyer how long it had been doing that. He said, "I don't know. A few minutes? I thought it was a reflection." We watched for another 10 minutes. Nothing else showed up. I told him to stay put and went to check the systems myself. Everything was nominal. No alerts, no surges, all logs were clean. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. Not from the monitors, from the outside. I kept glancing at the windows like I expected to see someone standing there. Marquez never showed up that night. He texted just before 6:30 and said he wasn't feeling well. I didn't blame him. I left an hour early, didn't even finish my shift. Just packed up my gear, signed out, and drove home. The next morning, I called my supervisor and told him I wouldn't be coming back for my final day. I officially retired the following week. I've never talked to Marquez or Dwyer since. Don't know if they ever saw anything else. I know Dwyer didn't stay long. Someone told me he transferred out by spring. And I heard the blacked out cameras never came back online. They replaced them eventually, but nobody ever found a cause for the failure. Now I live in a quiet little place just outside North Pole, closer to the grandkids. I keep things simple. Don't go out at night unless I have to. If I do, I always look up first. Just a habit, I guess. I don't think I'll ever go back to clear, even in the daytime. I don't think I want to know if anything's still out there. I started jogging in the mornings after I moved to Nokesville. It's a quiet little town, lots of farmland, not much traffic. The roads aren't well lit, but that's part of why I liked it. I'd leave around 5:15 a.m. just before dawn and stick to the loop near Bristow Road. You get the frogs, the crickets, the early birds, peaceful. I never saw many people out that early. Maybe a pickup or two heading to work, but that was it. This was late October. A Tuesday, I think. The weather had cooled off. Not cold enough for gloves, but the air had that bite to it. I remember I was wearing my orange windbreaker because it made me easier to see, even though barely anyone drove that route. The moon was out, about half full, and I didn't need a headlamp because the sky was just starting to go from black to blue. Real pretty, actually. I remember thinking it looked like the kind of morning you'd want to paint if you had the patience. I just passed the Martin place, that old two-story with the rusted tractor in the side yard, when I noticed the lights. They were just above the tree line to my right. The woods over there are dense, no houses tucked in, just tall pines and oaks. What caught my eye was how evenly spaced the lights were. I counted 5, maybe 6 of them, not blinking. White, steady, and completely still, or so I thought. I slowed down, thinking it might be a low-flying plane or maybe a helicopter hovering, but I couldn't hear anything. No blades, no engines, not even wind. And the way they were sitting didn't look like aircraft formation. They weren't in a line or a triangle, more like a ring, but tilted at an angle, like someone was spinning a coin and hit pause mid-flip. Then I realized they were moving. Slowly. Rotating in a circle, not the way a helicopter would bank or shift position. The whole set of lights was moving together, perfectly smooth, almost like a mobile hanging from a ceiling, just gently turning. I stood still and watched, trying to make sense of it. I don't know how long I stared, maybe a minute, maybe less, but it felt long enough for my body to start cooling off, for the sweat on my face to sting a little in the breeze. Then I turned around to see if anyone else was coming down the road. Just out of instinct, I think. I wasn't scared yet, just unsettled. When I turned back, the lights were gone, not fading, not rising or flying off, just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. I took a few steps back, trying to reposition myself, thinking maybe they'd shifted behind the trees or maybe I was standing at the wrong angle. Nothing. And that's when I noticed the quiet. Dead quiet. No insects, no birds, not even wind rustling the branches. I stood there, breathing, waiting for some kind of noise. Even my footsteps felt wrong when I shifted on the gravel shoulder. Usually that stretch of road is full of chirping and clicking and rustling by that hour. I'd never heard it go completely still before. That's when the fear kicked in. Not panic, just this tight, uneasy feeling like I was being watched. I looked back toward the trees again, tried to make out any movement, but everything was still. I turned around and started jogging again, just a little faster than normal. My footsteps sounded way too loud on the asphalt. That silence followed me for maybe a quarter mile. I kept glancing up, expecting to see the lights again, but the sky was starting to brighten and there was nothing. At the bend near the cattle gate, I heard birds. Just a few at first, then more. Little chirps and calls like someone had unpaused the woods. I slowed back down and looked behind me. Still nothing. I finished the loop like I always did. When I got back to the house, my husband Nick was still asleep. I sat on the porch with some water and didn't say anything. I didn't tell him for a couple days. I don't know why. I guess I just wanted to convince myself it was something normal. The next few mornings, I ran the same route, same time. Nothing strange happened, but every time I passed that stretch near the Martin place, I'd slow down and look at the trees. I never saw the lights again, but twice, just twice, I noticed the same thing. No sound, no birds, no bugs. Just for a moment, like everything had stopped holding its breath. We were out by Silver Lake, just outside of Prescott, Arizona. It was one of those nights where the air cools down enough after a hot day that you don't mind sitting outside long after sunset. The sky was clear, no moon, just stars. You could see every constellation, crisp and sharp. Me, my buddy Nate, and two others from our hiking group, Jen and Carlos, decided to drive out there after dinner. We'd been talking about doing some stargazing for a while. It wasn't far, maybe a 20-minute drive from town, and the lake's pretty quiet at night, except for the occasional fisherman or camper. We got there around 9 p.m. The parking lot was nearly empty. We grabbed some blankets, lawn chairs, and a couple of beers and headed down to the water's edge. The lake's kind of like a natural mirror when the air's still, and tonight was perfect for that. At first, we just lay back looking up, pointing out Orion, the Big Dipper, random stuff like that. The usual stargazing chat, you know? It was peaceful. The only sounds were crickets and the soft lapping of water against the rocks. After a while, Jen, who's always got this habit of staring down at the water, nudged me and said, "Hey, look at that." She was pointing at the lake's surface where, just a little way out, a soft, steady light was reflecting. It wasn't like a flashlight or anything we brought. It was this gentle glow, kind of pale blue, flickering in place near the middle of the lake. I looked up to see if I could catch whatever was casting it, but the sky above was clear, empty. No airplanes, no drones, no boats, nothing. Carlos shrugged. Maybe a fishing boat? We all looked around, but the shore opposite us was empty. No lights, no movement. The water was flat, no wakes or ripples beyond the usual. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a reflection from the campground across the lake. But that area was dark, and the campground had been closed since early spring. We sat quietly, eyes shifting between the water and the sky. The light stayed steady. It didn't move, didn't get brighter or dimmer, just hung there in the water like it was something solid under the surface. Nate got out his phone and tried to zoom in, but the light was too far and kind of fuzzy. When he put the phone down, the reflection was still there. Then something odd happened. Jen said, "Look." The reflection shifted, not smoothly, but in a sort of jittery way, like it jumped a few feet to the right, then back. It wasn't waves or wind. The water was perfectly still, except for tiny ripples near the shore. We all leaned forward, watching. The light blinked off for a second, and when it came back on, it was maybe twice as bright, then it dimmed again. None of us said much. There was this weird tension, like we were waiting for something, but we didn't know what. Suddenly, the light vanished completely. Just gone. No flicker, no fade, nothing. We all glanced up. The sky was still empty. Not a single star blinked out or changed. Did it just disappear? Carlos asked quietly. Yeah, I said, but honestly, I wasn't sure what to make of it. We stayed by the lake for an hour more, watching for any sign of the light, but it never came back. The night was calm, nothing else out of the ordinary. On the drive home, we tried to talk about it like it was no big deal, but nobody really believed that. The next day, I checked out online forums for Prescott. Local weather reports, any notices about the lake, drone activity, military exercises nearby, nothing. No reports of strange lights, no warnings. Jen mentioned that a friend of hers, who's a park ranger in a nearby forest, once told her about will-o'-the-wisp stuff. old tales about lights in the marshes, but she didn't really believe in that kind of thing. Neither did I. What bugs me most is that it was only in the water. If it had been something flying or floating above, we would have seen it in the sky. But we didn't. Just the reflection, no source. It's like something was there just beneath the surface, but whatever it was, it didn't want us to see it directly. I keep replaying that night in my head, trying to figure it out. Maybe we imagined it, but 4 people saw it. I don't think we'd all hallucinate the same thing. I still go out near Silver Lake sometimes, hoping to catch it again, but the lake's been quiet since. No strange lights, no reflections, nothing. Still, every now and then, when the air is dead calm and the stars are out, I'll look down at the water, half expecting to see that pale blue glow flickering just beneath the surface. We were about 10 miles into the trail when we saw it. I was hiking with my friend Leo. He's from Colorado, comes out to visit once or twice a year. We've known each other since college. That weekend, we were doing the Hoh River Trail up in Olympic National Park. It's out there, way out. You hike through Rainforest, then it climbs into alpine stuff once you hit Glacier Meadows. We weren't going all the way to Blue Glacier, just an overnight trip. Camped around mile 12 and planned to head back in the morning. It was late May, still a little snow up top, but nothing we couldn't handle. That first day was quiet. A few people on the lower part of the trail, but once we passed the waterfall section, we didn't see anybody. Weather was decent, low clouds, kind of gray and misty, but not raining. It happened somewhere between mile 9 and 10. We'd stopped for a snack. There's a big flat rock off to the left of the trail, overlooks a patch of mossy trees and this little ravine with a stream. We took off our packs, sat there eating granola bars and jerky. It was calm, no wind, pretty quiet except for the stream and a couple birds. Then Leo looked up and asked, "Is that a drone?" I followed his gaze and saw it just above the treetops. At first, I didn't even register what I was looking at. It was round, not like a quadcopter, not even a fancy one, more like a smooth silver dot just floating in place, not wobbling or tilting, just dead still. No sound, Leo said. He was right, it was maybe 200 feet up, just hovering. No hum, no propeller noise, not even a buzz. The weird thing was, you could feel it wasn't right. I don't know how to describe that, like it didn't belong in the air. We watched it for maybe 10 seconds, it didn't move. Then, all at once, it zipped backward. No turn, no arc, just shot straight backward through the mist. Same direction it had come from. It went maybe 50 feet in half a second, stopped again, and then rose straight up into the clouds. Gone. We both just stood there staring at the sky. I remember Leo kind of laughed, but it wasn't like he thought it was funny. More like he didn't know what else to do. "You saw that, right?" he said. I nodded. We talked about it for a few minutes, trying to make it make sense. Maybe it was a drone and the wind caught it, or some kind of optical trick, but there was no wind, and the way it moved, it didn't look like anything controlled by rotors. It didn't even move like it had weight. We kept hiking. I think we both wanted to act like it wasn't a big deal. We didn't say much for the next few miles. At the campsite, Elk Lake, it was just us. No other tents. It's not really a lake, more like a wide pond, surrounded by trees and snow patches. We set up the tent, boiled some water, made dinner. I noticed something weird when I went to hang the bear bag. The woods were quiet, like too quiet. Usually at dusk you hear stuff, birds, squirrels, wind. There was none of that, just dead still. Even the water was calm. Leo noticed it too. He said something like, "Feels like we're being watched," but in a jokey way. I didn't laugh. I kind of did feel that way. That night I couldn't sleep. It was cold but not freezing. Maybe upper 30s, we were both in decent bags, but around 2 or 3 a.m. I woke up and realized I was just lying there. Eyes open. No reason. No sound. Then I saw the light. It wasn't bright. Just a faint glow filtering through the nylon. I thought maybe the moon came out, but when I looked at my watch it said 3:17, and there wasn't supposed to be much moon that night. I didn't want to wake Leo, but I sat up real slow and unzipped the tent just enough to peek out. There was a light in the woods, not a flashlight, not a fire. It was bluish-white, kind of soft, about 20 feet off the ground, just floating there behind the trees. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no voices. It wasn't moving. I closed the tent. I didn't say anything to Leo. I laid back down and stared at the ceiling until the light was gone. In the morning, everything looked normal. Sky was still overcast, ground was dry, the bear bag was untouched. But Leo was acting weird. He said, "Did you hear anything last night?" I told him I saw a light. He just nodded and said, "Yeah." When I asked him what he meant, he said he woke up around 3 and felt like someone was standing near the tent. He didn't hear anything, just this feeling like someone was really close. He thought about calling out, but something told him not to. We packed up early. I don't think either of us wanted to hang around longer than we had to. The hike down was faster. We didn't stop much. Around mile 8, we passed a couple heading up, but we didn't talk long. About 2 miles from the trailhead, Leo pointed something out. One of the big trees near the path had this weird scar on it. Not a lightning strike. It looked like a chunk of bark had been peeled off in a perfect oval, about 2 feet wide. The wood underneath was smooth. He took a picture of it on his phone. When we got back to the car, we checked the photo, but it was just black. The image didn't save. I checked my watch before we left. It said 11:48. When we pulled out of the lot and passed the ranger station, the car clock said 12:09. I know that doesn't sound crazy, but it was a 15-minute hike from where I checked my watch, maybe 20 max. I'd synced the watch with my phone the day before. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe the watch glitched. Maybe we just lost track. But when I got home and pulled the photos off my camera, the last few had weird timestamps. One shot I took at dinner showed up as 4:26 a.m., even though it was clearly daylight. I still don't really know what we saw. We haven't talked about it since. I never planned to camp near an old missile silo. Honestly, I picked that spot on a whim just because it was quiet and away from the usual crowded campgrounds. I'd driven out from Lincoln, Nebraska, looking for a weekend alone with my thoughts, a little break from work, and the city noise. I found this spot off a gravel road just a few miles from a decommissioned missile silo that's been out of use for decades. There's nothing left but some concrete bunkers, rusted fences, and an eerie silence that sticks to the place. I pulled my RV into a clearing not far from the silo, set up the satellite dish, and got settled in. I wasn't expecting much beyond a quiet weekend reading and maybe a hike. The sky was clear that evening, with a slow breeze and just a hint of chill in the air. I remember checking my watch about 10 p.m. before I settled down for the night. That first night was mostly normal. I fell asleep around midnight, but just before 3 a.m., I woke up because of this deep, low hum that seemed to vibrate through the whole camper. It wasn't loud, exactly, but it was constant and felt almost physical, like the ground itself was humming. I sat up and listened, thinking maybe it was some distant machinery or a truck on the gravel road, but there was nothing. No engine sounds, no headlights, just that hum. At exactly 3 a.m., my phone screen flickered, and the clock reset to 12 a.m. for a second, then went back to the right time. The lights inside the camper dimmed for a moment, and my little radio crackled with static before going silent, then came back on. Nothing else seemed broken, but everything electronic, my phone, the radio, the digital clock on the microwave, glitched like that, just for a couple of seconds. I chalked it up to a power surge or some interference from who knows what. The old missile silo was still humming faintly, like it was alive beneath the dirt. I tried to go back to sleep, but kept waking up every few minutes, always right around the same time, 3 a.m. The next night, the same thing happened. The hum started a little before 3, got louder for a few minutes, and then just stopped. And right at 3 a.m., the electronics all blinked out for a second, and just like the night before. That's when I started to notice other odd stuff. My laptop, which I'd left open on the table, had weird files show up. Just blank text documents with nothing inside, but timestamps right at 3:01 a.m. Nothing I saved, nothing I opened. I deleted them each morning, but new ones appeared the next night. I asked around on some local forums and from people I met in town. No one else reported hearing the hum, and nobody said their electronics acted up like mine. The missile silo had been out of commission since the 80s. No one used it anymore. No radio towers nearby, no power plants or factories. The third night, I was trying to stay awake, waiting for the hum. At 2:45 a.m., I was outside, standing near my RV with a flashlight. The air was colder now, and the sky had clouded over, thick gray low clouds that swallowed the stars. The hum started around 2:55, a low vibration under my feet that rose slowly. It wasn't a mechanical sound exactly, more like a frequency you could feel rather than hear. I looked toward the silo, which was just a dark silhouette against the cloudy sky, and noticed a faint glow around the top edge. It wasn't a bright light, just a soft, pulsing orange glow. I thought maybe it was just a reflection of the moon or something in the clouds, but the moon was completely blocked. At 3 a.m., the hum peaked, then suddenly stopped. That's when the electronics blinked again. My phone shut off and rebooted, the radio crackled and went silent, and even the small LED lights on my RV's control panel flickered. For a moment, everything was dead quiet. Then the glow above the silo disappeared, and the clouds seemed to shift, almost like they parted for a second. I stood there frozen for a while, then went back inside, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, I checked my phone and saw the battery had dropped nearly to 20% during the night, even though I hadn't used it. The radio had a weak buzzing sound that wouldn't go away no matter how much I fiddled with it. And the laptop, again, had a new blank file, time-stamped exactly at 3:01 a.m. The rest of the day was quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from the silo or the surrounding trees. The wind shifted oddly sometimes, carrying strange smells, metallic, almost like ozone or burnt wire. The fourth night, I decided to record audio with my phone. I left it on the table and tried to stay awake until after 3. The hum started again, and when it hit its peak at exactly 3 a.m., I heard something else beneath the vibration, a faint clicking noise, like a slow mechanical heartbeat or a signal. It was steady, rhythmic, and didn't match anything natural. After that, I looked out the window again and caught a glimpse of something moving near the edge of the silo, just a shadow shifting in the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone. I thought about packing up and leaving, but I was curious. What could explain any of this? I'd read about old military sites having strange electromagnetic fields, but nothing matched what I was experiencing. On the 5th night, I left the camper door unlocked and went outside just before 3. It was chilly, and the clouds had cleared, revealing a starless black sky. The hum started again, this time louder and more intense. The air vibrated with it, and I felt a slight pressure in my ears. The orange glow appeared again around the silo's edge, pulsing softly. Then at 3 a.m., my watch and phone both stopped for a full 10 seconds. The radio died completely. No static, no sound. The control panel lights went dark. Then everything flickered back on, and the glow vanished. I stayed outside another half hour, but nothing else happened. The next morning, my electronics seemed fine for the first time. No strange files, no dead battery, no buzzing radio. I packed up and left before dark. Driving away, I looked back at the silo fading into the distance and wondered if whatever was causing all that was tied to the place or just some odd natural phenomenon. I never found an explanation that fit, and no one else I talked to had heard or seen anything similar. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear a faint hum in the back of my mind. Not loud, but enough to make me look around, wondering if it's back or if I just imagined the whole thing. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to share something like this, but here I am. It started with my son, Dylan, when he was 7, living in this tiny farming town in central Nebraska. Real quiet place. Mostly cornfields and old dirt roads. Not much to do except look out over the fields and watch the seasons change. We've lived here for a few years, trying to escape the city noise and just get some space. One afternoon in early October, Dylan comes running into the kitchen, holding up this drawing he'd made at school. It was one of those crayon things, messy, a kid's drawing. But there was something off about it. The picture showed a tall, thin figure standing just outside a window. It was gray, kind of shadowy, with these really long arms that almost stretched past the edges of the page. The figure's head was big, oval-shaped, no real facial features, just dark blotches where eyes might be. The window it stood at had these jagged lines like the glass was cracked or broken. I asked him what it was, and he said, "That's the tall, gray thing with long arms. It was outside our window last night." My wife, Rachel, just laughed it off. She said kids have wild imaginations, especially after watching too much TV or hearing stuff from other kids. I wanted to believe that, but Dylan was serious. He wasn't usually a kid who made scary drawings or told wild stories. I asked him where exactly it was outside, and he pointed to the bedroom window that faces the backyard. Our backyard is pretty dark at night, fenced but open beyond that to the cornfield. I told him, "You sure you weren't dreaming?" He looked me right in the eye and said, "No, Dad, I saw it for real. It was just standing there, watching." That night, I kept an eye out while putting him to bed. The moon was almost full, so the yard was dim but visible from his window. Nothing unusual. I told myself maybe he saw a shadow from a tree or some animal walking by, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he really saw something. A few days later, I was talking to our neighbor, Mark. He lives about 2 houses down, and he's got one of those basic security cameras mounted above his front porch, pointing toward the street and a bit of our yards. Mark checks the footage sometimes when he's not around, just for peace of mind. That morning, Mark mentioned he caught something weird on his camera at about 2 a.m., right by our place. He said he saw this tall, dark silhouette standing near the fence between our properties. Just motionless, no obvious shape, but definitely not human. I asked if he was sure it wasn't a tree or something caught in the wind. He said no, it was too still, too tall, and had these long arms that dangled low. It looked like it was watching our house. He sent me the footage, grainy black and white from the infrared camera. The figure was there for maybe 2 minutes, standing near the back fence, unmoving. The shape was hard to make out, but definitely tall and narrow, with arms that seemed longer than any person's. No face or head shape was clear, just a dark blur. Then it suddenly disappeared, as if it just faded out. Rachel saw the footage too. She was quiet for a long time, which is rare for her. We all agreed it was strange, but we didn't want to jump to conclusions. After that, Dylan kept drawing the same figure. Every few days, he'd bring home a new version of the tall gray thing, sometimes with slight differences. Sometimes the arms were even longer, or the figure appeared in different spots around the house. One time, he drew it standing just outside the front door, and that freaked me out a little. I started paying more attention to the backyard at night. Sometimes, I thought I'd catch glimpses of something moving just beyond the fence line. Nothing solid, just shadows that didn't match the trees or bushes. A few nights, I swear, I heard something scratching near the fence, but when I'd go check, there was nothing there. We didn't tell anyone else in town. I figured people would think I was crazy. My parents were skeptical too when I mentioned it on the phone. Probably just a raccoon or a stray dog, they said. Maybe that's true, but I can't explain the drawings or the camera footage. One night, about a week after Mark's video, I was outside smoking a cigarette on the back porch just before midnight. It was cold and the wind was still. I looked out over the yard, and for a moment, I thought I saw that same tall gray figure standing at the far end near the cornfield, just outside the fence. It wasn't moving, just standing there like it was watching the house. I froze for a second. Then, as I blinked, it was gone. I didn't want to wake Rachel or Dylan, so I stayed out there a while, just staring into the darkness, but nothing came back. The next morning, Dylan told me he'd had bad dreams again. Dreams about the tall gray thing coming inside the house, but never actually doing anything, just standing there, watching him sleep. I didn't sleep much that night. After a few weeks, the drawings stopped. Dylan said he hadn't seen the figure in a while. The strange noises at night stopped too. Mark said his camera never caught the silhouette again. But sometimes when I'm alone in the backyard after dark, I get this feeling like someone's watching. It's never quite there, more like a shadow at the edge of my vision. I keep thinking I hear faint scratching sounds by the fence or a rustle in the cornfields, but when I turn around, nothing's there. I don't know what it was or why it was there. Dylan never mentioned it again after that month, and life mostly went back to normal. But those drawings and that footage still sit on my phone, a reminder that maybe there's something out there we don't understand, watching from the dark. I was out on the back porch of my place in Flagstaff, Arizona, trying to get some shots of the full moon that night. It was early spring, around 10:30 p.m., and the sky was clear except for a thin haze that made the moon look a little soft around the edges. I've been into photography for years, mostly landscapes and night sky stuff, so I had my camera on a tripod aimed up, fiddling with the settings to get the best shot of the craters and shadows. I remember the air being chilly but still calm. No wind, which is perfect for sharp photos. The neighborhood was quiet except for the occasional distant bark of a dog or a car passing on the main road a few blocks away. Nothing unusual at all. I'd taken a few shots looking through the viewfinder when I noticed something odd. Across the moon's surface, there was a small dark shape moving in a perfectly straight line. It zipped across from one edge to the other way too fast to be a bird or any plane. The movement was too direct, almost mechanical, with no deviation or change in speed. I blinked a couple of times, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me or that I caught a smudge on the lens. I didn't see anything moving in the sky with my naked eyes, just the moon, perfectly still. But through the camera, that shape was definitely there, crossing the lunar surface like it was slicing through the shot. I clicked the shutter a few times trying to capture it again, but it didn't show back up. It was only in that one frame. I packed up my gear and went inside, feeling a little weird, but figuring it was probably just a shadow or a speck of dirt on the sensor. The next day, I loaded the photos on my computer and zoomed in. The object was unmistakable, a dark, solid-looking shape moving left to right, sharp edges, no blur. I showed it to my wife, Marissa, but she just shrugged and said it was probably a bug or something caught in the lens. I tried asking my neighbor, Pete, if he'd seen anything unusual that night. He's a night owl and sometimes hangs out on his porch late. He said no, nothing at all, just the moon looking the same as always. Over the next few days, I kept thinking about that photo. I went back out on the porch every night for a week, setting up my camera and watching the moon, hoping to see the shape again. Nothing. No strange shadows, no fast-moving objects, just the usual craters and dust. One night, a couple of evenings later, I was outside again, this time later, close to midnight. The sky was partly cloudy, and the moon was just a sliver behind the clouds. I was sitting in a chair, sipping some coffee, when I noticed the streetlights flickering. I thought maybe the power was acting up because of some storm moving in, but it was patchy. One light would dim for a second, then come back on. The others stayed steady. That flickering went on for about 5 minutes, slow and random, and then stopped. I looked up toward the hills beyond the neighborhood and saw something I couldn't explain. There was this faint, pulsing glow coming from just past the ridge, a cool bluish light that seemed to hover in place. It didn't move like a plane or helicopter and wasn't bright enough to be a spotlight or flare. I grabbed my camera and aimed toward it, but by the time I got the lens focused, the light was gone. I told Marissa about the light the next morning, but she just said it was probably a reflection from a car or a drone, though she admitted she hadn't noticed anything herself. The weirdest part was that whenever I brought it up with other neighbors, nobody else reported seeing the light or the flickering streetlights. A few nights later, I was inside, editing photos from a different shoot, when my phone went dead suddenly with a low buzzing sound right before it shut off. I plugged it in and saw the battery was full just an hour earlier. The phone wouldn't turn back on for almost 20 minutes. Later that same night, I stepped outside to get some fresh air and noticed a soft humming sound coming from somewhere nearby. It was quiet and constant, almost like distant machinery, but without any identifiable source. I walked toward the sound and saw nothing. No cars, no generators, no lights, just the quiet streets and houses. The next morning, my camera had a tiny scratch on the lens cover that I was sure hadn't been there before. No idea how it got there. I started paying more attention to other little things, too. The clock on the microwave would sometimes blink off for a few seconds. The radio in the car would pick up odd static bursts that didn't match any station. Even my laptop randomly slowed down, like something was interfering with it, but antivirus scans showed nothing. The strangest moment came about 10 days after that first photo. I was out on the porch again, watching the moon through my camera. The moon was about half full, bright and sharp. I noticed the same shape from before, a dark, thin object crossing the moon's surface again, moving fast, perfectly straight. Only this time, it seemed even closer, more defined. I called Marissa out to look, but she didn't see it. I asked Pete, but he just laughed it off, saying I probably needed new glasses. I kept snapping pictures, and the object crossed the frame 3 times that night, always at the same speed and angle. The night after that, I left my camera running on a time-lapse setting, expecting to catch the object again. When I reviewed the footage, the moon moved across the sky normally. No strange shapes or shadows crossing it. Nothing. I don't know what I saw in those photos or that one time out there on the porch. No one else ever saw the object or the strange lights or heard the humming. I kept looking, kept waiting for answers. But the more I tried to explain it, the less sense it made. Eventually, I stopped going out with the camera at night. Sometimes I still check those old photos on my computer and wonder if what I saw was just a trick of light or some glitch. But I can't explain what was crossing the moon that night, or why no one else saw it. We had been out in the desert for maybe an hour before any of it started. My girlfriend Laura and I had driven out late that Saturday night, just looking for some peace and a clear view of the stars. We're both kind of amateur astronomy fans. Nothing fancy, just a couple of folding chairs, a couple of blankets, and Laura's little binoculars. The place we picked was this dirt pull-off about 20 miles west of Tonopah, Nevada, far enough from town lights to actually see the Milky Way spread out like a pale smear across the sky. The night was dry, cold but not freezing. The kind of desert night where you can see your breath, but the air still feels smooth. Not a cloud in sight, and the stars were ridiculously bright, twinkling all over like someone shook a jar full of tiny lights. We'd set up by this rocky ridge, somewhere you could lean back and not worry about trees or hills blocking the view. We were talking quietly, pointing out constellations when Laura suddenly went quiet and turned her binoculars skyward, kind of frozen. I looked up and saw it, a cluster of lights, maybe 6 or 7, grouped tight in the sky. They weren't twinkling like stars, more steady, like LEDs. The thing was, they were hovering, just hanging there in the same spot, not drifting or blinking out. I asked her what she thought it was, but she shrugged and handed me the binoculars. Through them, it was clearer. Those lights were definitely together, forming a rough shape, nothing I recognized. No blinking lights like on planes, no sound, just this odd grouping, perfectly still. We watched for a while, maybe 10 minutes, neither of us saying much because it didn't make sense. Then, one light peeled off from the cluster and started moving. Slowly at first, tracing a wide arc around the others. It wasn't rushing or zigzagging, just this smooth, deliberate circle that must have been at least a quarter-mile wide, given how tiny they looked. The weirdest part was how it moved. There was no sound, no blinking or flashing, just this soft glow. It kept the same brightness the whole time, and after the wide loop, it came back to the cluster, rejoining perfectly, like a group of birds flying in formation. But these lights didn't move like any bird I've ever seen. No wings, no flutter, nothing. I told Laura, that can't be anything normal. She nodded, eyes wide. We both stayed quiet, just staring up, until the cluster slowly started drifting upward, fading into the night. Not shooting off, just slowly climbing until it was gone. I don't remember when I stopped breathing for a moment, but I know it happened. My mind tried to grab onto any explanation, but none fit. The whole thing lasted maybe 20 minutes. After that, the sky was just empty again, the stars like nothing had happened. We packed up and drove back, both uneasy but not really sure why. The road was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see some headlights following us, but there was nothing. The next morning, I called the local ranger station, wondering if anyone else reported anything weird. The guy on the phone laughed it off, said some campers always claim to see stuff out there, but no official reports. I tried to look it up later online, but the closest I found were people talking about weird lights in nearby counties. Nothing like what we saw. The strangest thing was that nothing else weird happened that night. No strange noises, no interference with our phones or the car. No feelings of being watched, just those lights, moving like nothing we'd seen before, then disappearing. I can't say what it was. I don't think it was a plane or a drone. Too high, too steady, too strange the way one moved alone and then rejoined the group. And it definitely wasn't a meteor or satellite. Those move fast and don't stop or loop around. Every time I think about it, I'm left with the same question. What were those lights doing out there in that silent desert sky? The night I was driving home from work, something happened that I still can't really explain. I was coming back from my usual night shift at the hospital in Spokane. It was late, almost 2 a.m., and the roads were mostly empty. The sky was clear, cold, the kind of early spring night where the air feels sharp, but still holds a little warmth from the day. I had my windows cracked just a bit to keep the car from feeling too stuffy, and the only thing filling the silence besides the engine was the faint hum of the radio, tuned low. About 20 minutes into the drive, somewhere out past the last stretch of streetlights before the highway gave way to the open fields, I saw it. A light in the sky, moving downwards slowly. At first, I thought it was a falling star, like the kind you see during meteor showers. But this one didn't fall the way a star usually does. It wasn't rushing or streaking across the sky. It just descended straight down, almost floating. I blinked a few times, thinking maybe I was seeing things, or maybe the city lights were messing with my eyes. But it was there, just hovering midair, maybe a few hundred feet above the ground. It didn't make a sound, not even the faintest buzz or crackle you'd expect from something moving through the atmosphere. I mean, it was dead silent. I slowed the car a little, watching it as it hung in place. The light wasn't bright like a spotlight or a street lamp. It was more like a soft glow, maybe yellowish or amber, but steady. It didn't flicker or move around much. I tried to see if I could figure out its shape, but it was too far away, just a bright blur. Then, just as slowly as it came down, it suddenly shot straight back up into the sky. Faster than anything I'd seen before, like a bullet, but again, without a sound. It disappeared into the dark night above the trees. I kept driving, but my heart was pounding. It wasn't fear exactly, more like confusion mixed with this strange kind of tension. I looked in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind me, maybe someone else who saw the same thing, but the road was empty. When I got home, I told my roommate Sarah about it. She laughed and said it was probably just a satellite or a drone. But I know what I saw. Drones don't move like that, especially not that high or that quietly. The next few nights, I kept glancing up while driving, hoping to catch it again or see something similar. Nothing. The sky was normal, the stars were normal, and traffic was just as sparse as usual. But that night, for some reason, everything felt different. I noticed other small things that didn't quite add up in the following days. My phone started glitching out. Calls dropped, the screen flickered randomly. My clock radio reset itself several times, always around 2 a.m. Even the lights in my apartment would dim briefly, like a quick power fluctuation, but the building's main power never went out. I tried to shrug it off at first. I'm not one to get spooked easily, but the more I thought about that light, the more uneasy I felt. The way it moved, the silence. There was no obvious explanation, no planes nearby, no satellites showing up on any of the tracking apps I checked. Just that slow fall, the hover, then the sudden climb back up. I thought maybe I was tired, overworked, just imagining things after a long shift. But the moment stuck with me. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night now, I find myself glancing up, scanning the sky, half expecting to see it again. But it hasn't come back. I don't know what it was. A trick of the light? Some kind of atmospheric phenomenon? Or something else, something I don't understand? All I know is, that night on the road, I saw something that moved too deliberately, too silently, to be a falling star. And it stopped in the air long enough for me to see it wasn't like anything I've seen before. The first time it happened, I thought my radio was just acting up. It was an old Zenith I'd picked up at a garage sale years ago, a big box with a wooden frame and a dial that still smelled faintly like cigarette smoke. I'd been tinkering with radios for decades. retired now, but it was a hobby I kept alive, something to occupy my hands and mind after I left the engineering ring firm. Anyway, it was late, about 11:47 p.m., though I only knew because I always checked the clock at that time. The radio was set to a local AM station, static humming softly in the background. Suddenly, from the speaker came three clear, simple tones in a sequence. Beep, 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 and then nothing else. The static returned, and the dial didn't move. I figured it was some interference, or maybe a nearby transmitter glitch. But that night, curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed a notebook and jotted down the time and what I'd heard. The next night, exactly the same thing happened at 11:47 p.m. Same three tones, same timing. I thought maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe my old radio was picking up some kind of automated message from a local station. But the nights rolled on, and every night at 11:47, the radio would buzz those three tones. I started logging it. Date, time, weather, anything that seemed relevant, but the pattern never changed. No variation, no added sounds, no voice, no background noise, just the same three tones. What really got to me was that it never happened at any other time. If I turned the radio off or changed the station, the tones didn't come. I had to have it on that exact frequency, and it had to be exactly 11:47 p.m. I set up a timer to make sure I was always awake for it. If I drifted off a little early or late, the tones wouldn't come. It was like some sort of clock that only ticked at one moment, once every 24 hours. The local AM station I tuned to was just a regular talk radio. Nothing special. I called them once, asked if they were broadcasting anything like that, but the technician laughed it off and said it must be interference or some kind of prank. I started testing other radios, my old transistor, a newer digital set, even a shortwave receiver, but none picked up the tones like my Zenith did. That old radio was special in this way. The others just had static. Months passed and I was getting weird looks from my family because I was waking up in the middle of the night to scribble notes about some damn beeps. I didn't care. It felt important in a way I couldn't explain. One night after the tones finished, I waited. I thought maybe the signal would do something else, maybe repeat or change, but nothing. Just silence. Then I heard something else, very faint, like a whisper on the edge of hearing. I strained to listen but couldn't make it out clearly. It didn't sound like radio static, more like a soft hum or maybe wind blowing through a distant tunnel. I checked the frequency again, still on the same station, still the same spot on the dial. After that, I got a little obsessed. I started recording the transmissions with an old cassette recorder, capturing the exact moment of the tones. When I played it back, the tones were pure, steady, and clear, but that faint whisper wasn't there. It was like it only existed live, impossible to capture. I even tried to map the signal, triangulate where it might be coming from, but there was no pattern, no clear direction. My house was in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of town. No known transmitters around except the local AM and a few police radio towers miles away. One evening, I was out on the porch, waiting for 11:47. The night was clear, dry, the kind of stillness that presses in on you. At exactly the time, the three tones came through the radio, steady and sharp. Then I noticed a light, not bright, more like a flicker off in the distance, maybe a couple of miles away. It wasn't a car or a street lamp. It was higher up like a hovering glow, soft blue-green. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was a plane or a helicopter, but nothing flew over our neighborhood that late without noise. And the light was steady before it vanished, no blinking or moving, just there and then not. After that, the feeling that I wasn't alone in this little mystery stayed with me. It wasn't fear exactly, more like an itch under my skin, like something was waiting for me to figure it out. Some nights, when the tones came through, the static would shift, and I'd think I heard faint patterns, maybe Morse code, but nothing consistent. Just noises I could never quite pin down. My wife asked if I wanted to move the radio to another room, but I refused. That old Zenith was the only one that worked. It was almost like it was built for this. I even looked up the model number and date, made in 1953, back when radios were all tubes and dials. One morning I woke up early and found my notes scattered on the floor near the radio. I didn't remember knocking them over, but maybe I did sleepwalk. When I picked them up, I saw a strange thing. The times for the tones weren't always exactly 11:47 anymore. Some nights the logging showed 11:46 or 11:48. I was sure I'd been careful, but the notes didn't lie. That made me question everything. Was I just imagining the exact time? Was my internal clock off? Then I checked the radio again. It was still tuned to the same frequency. The tones came through sharp and clear as always. That same night, the faint whisper returned after the tones, clearer this time. It was like a voice trying to form words, but failing. A kind of broken murmur I could almost understand, but never quite. I didn't record it. I thought maybe if I tried, it would disappear again like before. Over the next weeks, I felt the strange presence more. Sometimes when the tones played, I'd get the feeling of being watched from somewhere far away, like a pair of eyes tracking me through the static. One night, I left the radio on all day, waiting for 11:47 to roll around again. But the tones never came. I checked the radio the next night and found it had switched stations on its own, static filling the speaker. I set it back, and the next night the tones returned. I started thinking maybe the radio itself was acting like a kind of receiver, catching signals from somewhere I couldn't reach, or maybe somewhere else was reaching out to me. There was no logic to it, no patterns, no answers. I've tried explaining it to friends, but they just laugh or change the subject. Even my son thinks I'm wasting my time. But I keep the radio on, tuned to that frequency, and every night I wait for the three tones at 11:47 p.m. Sometimes I think I'm hearing things, or maybe I'm losing it, but the watch by the bedside says it's almost time again. I was driving home late one evening, just after dusk, heading back from a weekend trip. The route took me past that old Air Force base outside of Valley Ridge, the one that's mostly inactive these days, but still has a few planes and occasional night exercises. The road runs parallel to the runway for a stretch, so I often slow down there just to watch the jets. It's kind of a weird habit I picked up. Something about watching them roar off into the sky feels calming after a long day. This night was cool and clear, not a cloud in the sky. The street lights weren't very bright, so the runway lights stood out like little beacons. I was in my truck, windows down, the hum of the engine steady as I cruised along. Just past the main hangar, a fighter jet rolled into view on the runway, ready for takeoff. I pulled over near the chain link fence and watched. The jet's afterburners flared, and it zipped down the strip, lifting off smoothly into the air. Normally, the jet would climb fast, banking sharply, then disappear into the darkness, but this time it didn't behave like I expected. About 500 feet up, it just stalled, like someone hit pause on it. It hung there, perfectly still, engines screaming, but no movement. No wobble, no dive, no drift, just frozen in the air like it was glued. At first, I thought maybe I was seeing things. The air was clear, but the jet looked like it was suspended against the deepening blue sky. No motion at all. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe my brain was tired or the light was messing with me. Then, after maybe 5 seconds, the jet shot upward. Not just climbed, shot at an angle that made no sense. It was like it defied gravity, rising nearly straight up, engine roar fading into a high-pitched whistle as it disappeared above the clouds. The whole thing felt wrong, like the laws of physics were being ignored. No pilot I know could pull that off without the plane breaking apart or spinning out. But the jet looked intact, and the motion was smooth, like it was on rails. I stayed parked there, heart thumping, watching the spot where the jet vanished, half expecting it to come back down or lose control. Nothing. I got back on the road, but my mind was spinning. That jet takeoff was the strangest thing I'd ever seen, and I watched planes regularly. A few miles down, I noticed something odd in the side mirror. A pair of bright lights hovering just above the treetops behind me. They weren't like car headlights or any normal light I'd seen on the road. They were steady, round, almost glowing with this weird, soft light, and they kept pace with my truck no matter how fast I went. I slowed down to 35 miles per hour, watching in the mirror. The lights didn't blink or change. I tried looking over my shoulder, but the trees blocked a clear view. I sped up again, pushing toward 50 miles per hour. The lights stayed with me, moving silently through the dark. I thought about pulling off and stopping to see what it was, but part of me just wanted to get home. Then out of nowhere, the lights blinked out. Just vanished like a switch had been flipped. I checked all around. Nothing. When I got to my driveway, I sat in the truck for a while, trying to process everything. The jet, the hovering lights, the impossible climb. I felt weird, like I'd walked into something I wasn't meant to see. Over the next few days, I found myself driving that route again, hoping to catch a glimpse of the jet or those lights, but nothing happened. The base seemed quieter than usual. I talked to a couple of coworkers who've spent time near that airstrip, but no one mentioned anything unusual that night. Flight logs are off limits, and no news reports talked about any strange incidents. I keep wondering about that moment the jet just stopped midair. What held it up? And those lights, were they connected? Were they watching? I don't know, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. But that night, something was different near that base. Something I can't explain. I was out hiking late one night, taking advantage of the cool air after a long, hot week. I'd left my car at the trailhead around 9:30 p.m., planning to do a loop that usually took me about 2 hours. The trail winds through dense woods just outside of Millersville, a small town that's surrounded by enough forest to make you forget you're not deep in the mountains. It was a clear night, not a cloud in the sky, with a sliver of a crescent moon hanging low over the trees. The temperature was just cool enough to keep the bugs off, but not so cold that I needed a jacket. I'd been hiking this trail for years, so I knew the terrain well and felt comfortable moving at a steady pace with my headlamp. About 45 minutes in, I slowed down near a clearing where the trail widened. I remember thinking it was odd how quiet it was. The usual chorus of night insects was barely there, almost like the woods had gone on mute. That's when I saw the deer. It was standing maybe 20 yards ahead, right on the edge of the clearing. The thing that caught me was how still it was. Not just standing still, but completely frozen, like a statue carved from wood. Its head was tilted upward, eyes fixed on something just above the treetops. I froze too and tried to figure out what it was looking at. I scanned the dark canopy with my headlamp off, not wanting to spook the deer or ruin my night vision. At first, I didn't see anything, just branches rustling faintly in the breeze. After a minute or so, I caught it. A shape, almost impossible to describe. It was a shadow, but not like any shadow I'd seen. It was smooth, barely outlined against the night sky, and it didn't move the way something falling or swaying in the wind would. It just hovered above the treetops, maybe 40 or 50 feet high. The shape was dimly glowing, but not like a light source. More like the faint shimmer you see on wet under streetlights. It was subtle, just enough to make out that it wasn't a bird or anything familiar. I thought maybe it was a weird weather balloon or a drone, but there was no blinking light or noise. The air was completely still, and I couldn't hear any mechanical hum. Nothing moved in the trees, no other animals. I kept watching the deer, and it stayed like that, unblinking, unflinching, staring upward at this strange thing. I could feel my heart starting to speed up, but I stayed where I was, too curious to look away. Then, without warning, the deer bolted. It exploded from its frozen position and shot straight into the woods, disappearing into the shadows with a rush of underbrush cracking. The sudden movement felt like a release of tension that had been building in the air. The shape above the trees didn't move. It just stayed there for another few seconds, perfectly still. Then it slowly drifted away, rising higher until it disappeared behind the ridge. I stood there a long time after it vanished, eyes fixed on where it had been. The silence returned, but now it felt heavy, like the woods were watching me back. I finally turned on my headlamp and started hiking again. But the trail seemed different. The trees looked darker, and every shadow felt too deep, like something was lurking just out of sight. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the shape again, but it never came. When I got back to my car, my hands were shaking a little. I wasn't sure why. I hadn't seen anything overtly threatening, but the whole experience felt off, like I'd stumbled on something that wasn't meant for me. I drove home slow, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The forest on either side of the road looked normal, but the memory of that hovering shape and the deer's reaction kept playing over in my mind. In the days after, I told a few friends who hiked that trail, but no one else had seen anything unusual. No missing time, no strange sounds. Just me and the memory of that quiet, glowing shape hanging above the trees while a deer stared right through the night. The power cut out around 11:45 p.m. on a Thursday. That's not that unusual out here. Weather knocks it out a couple times a year, especially when the wind kicks up through the draw. But this time it wasn't windy and it hadn't stormed in days. I live in a small place outside Magdalena, New Mexico. It's about a 15-minute drive from town, up a dirt road most people wouldn't even notice unless they were trying to get lost. I rent an old trailer on a piece of land owned by a guy named Warren, who lives in the main house down the hill. There's not much around us, just hills, pinyon trees, and empty sky. That night I was reading in bed when everything just went dark. The fans stopped. The little light on the smoke detector blinked once and died. My phone was still at 40%, so I grabbed it and turned on the flashlight, figuring maybe a breaker tripped. I checked the panel outside. Everything looked fine. I walked down the hill toward Warren's place to see if he still had power, but the porch light was out and the windows were dark. The weird thing was how quiet it was. Usually when the power goes, it's quiet. No hum from the fridge, no electronics buzzing. But this was more than that. I didn't hear anything. Not the wind, not the crickets. No dogs barking in the distance, which you normally hear even at night out here. Just before I knocked on Warren's door, I stopped. There was this sound. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like a low-frequency hum, almost too low to pinpoint. It wasn't coming from the trailer or any machine. It felt like it was just around, like it was in the sky. It made the hair on my arms stand up. I stood there in the dirt for a while, just listening. The sound didn't pulse or change pitch. It stayed steady, almost like pressure. I knocked on Warren's door, but no one answered. I didn't want to keep banging, since he's not exactly the friendliest guy to wake up. I headed back up to my trailer, and when I crested the little ridge before my place, I saw a light in the sky. Now I know how that sounds. This wasn't some beam or disc or anything. It looked like a plane at first, just a single, bright point. But it was still. Not moving, not blinking. I watched it for maybe a minute, then looked away to see if there were any others. The stars were all visible, no clouds at all, but nothing else seemed off besides that light. When I looked back, it was gone. I figured maybe it was just a plane banking away or something I misread, so I didn't think too much about it. I went back inside and tried to check the electric co-op's outage map, but the signal was dead. No data, no service. About 20 minutes later, I started hearing this distant honking. It was faint, like maybe down in town, but it didn't stop. Just one car alarm going off in the distance, then a pause, then another one. It was the pattern that got me. It wasn't all at once. It was one, then another, a few seconds later, then another. Each one a little farther away, like something was moving down the streets, setting them off one by one. Magdalena isn't big. Main Street is basically 3 blocks long, with a few shops, the feed store, and a gas station. Most of the cars would have been parked along there overnight. The alarms kept going for maybe 5 minutes, always one at a time, always in order. Then silence again. No crickets, no frogs in the arroyo, not even wind through the brush. Just that low hum, still there, still vibrating in the background. I stepped out onto the porch and just stood there, phone light off, listening. That's when I saw the tree line down the ridge flicker. I don't really know how else to describe it. It wasn't a flash. It wasn't lightning. The trees themselves didn't move, but the light around them stuttered, like watching a video buffer where the brightness jumps but nothing else shifts. It happened again maybe 30 seconds later. Just a slight flicker, but it made everything look wrong for a second. The humming got louder after that. I stepped off the porch and walked toward the clearing where I keep my truck. The air felt thick. Not hot, exactly, but like everything was slightly pressurized. I had this weird sense of being watched, but not in the paranoid way. It felt like standing in a room where someone's behind you, and you know they're there before they speak. I got in the truck and tried to start it. Nothing. Lights didn't come on, no clicks, nothing. Same with the dome light. My phone still worked, but the flashlight was glitching. It kept dimming and pulsing like the battery was dying, even though it still read 33%. I turned it off. From the truck window, I could see Warren's house down the hill, and all around it, these soft glows kept blinking in and out behind the trees, like someone walking through the brush with a light cupped in their hand, but they never broke the tree line. Every few seconds, one would flash, then another, 10 yards away, then silence again. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. The sky had that strange, low, overcast look, even though there were no clouds. It wasn't just dark, it was like the dark had weight. Then, finally, the humming faded. Not all at once. It just slowly tapered off like someone lowering the volume dial. The moment it stopped, I could hear insects again. Distant frogs. A coyote barked somewhere past the draw. The porch light on Warren's house came back on. My fridge kicked in. My fan spun up. The power was back. I tried the truck again. It turned over like normal. I stayed up until the sun rose, just sitting on the porch with a thermos of coffee and a rifle across my lap. Not because I thought I'd need it, just because I needed something to do with my hands. Next morning, I went into town to fill up on gas and get some groceries, and overheard two guys at the pump talking about the outage. One of them, Luis, runs the auto repair shop. He said the weirdest thing was how all the car alarms on Main had gone off, in order, one by one. He said the sheriff drove through afterward and didn't see a thing. No signs of break-ins, no wind, nothing. I asked if anyone else heard a humming, and he looked at me for a long second, then just said, "Yeah, like a transformer, but from everywhere." That was it. No explanation. No one came around asking questions. The electric co-op chalked it up to a substation trip, even though none of their logs showed any faults that night. I haven't seen the lights again, but I did notice, about a week later, that one of the pinyon trees on the ridge behind my trailer had a long blackened streak down its trunk. No burn smell, no ash, just this smooth, shiny mark from the top all the way to the base. It hasn't grown any needles since. I was hiking with my buddy, Eric, out near the old Clearview Fire Tower last September. We'd planned a 2-day trip through the hills east of Spokane. Nothing crazy, just some familiar trails and camping near the tower itself. It's a popular spot for locals, but pretty remote if you stick to the back routes, which we did. We started early morning, weather was crisp and clear. You know that kind of fall day where the air feels clean but not cold, and the sky's a deep blue. We had GPS units for navigation and handheld radios to keep in touch, mostly because the area has some sketchy spots for cell service. We hit the trail around 7 a.m., light packs, good energy. The hike was smooth, nothing out of the ordinary. We chatted, joked about how dangerous we were being in the wilderness with all our gadgets. The tower wasn't open to the public anymore, just an old metal skeleton on the ridge, used maybe a few decades ago for spotting fires. Around noon, we reached the base of the hill leading up to the tower. Eric wanted to check it out, so we left our packs by a tree and started climbing the narrow path. The forest was quiet except for some distant birds and the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. We got to the tower, and the view was exactly what you'd expect. Miles of trees rolling out under a blue sky, with the city faint on the horizon. I pulled out my GPS to mark the spot and check our position, but the unit flickered and then went blank. I tried turning it off and back on. Nothing. Eric's unit was doing the same thing. Must be dead batteries, I said, but we both knew they were new. Still, I checked mine again and even swapped batteries between units, but no luck. Eric grabbed his radio and clicked the button to check in. "Dispatch, this is Eagle 1. Do you copy?" His voice sounded weirdly hesitant. No response. "Try again," I said. He tried a few more times. No static, no crackle, just silence. I tried mine next, but the same. That's when it started to feel off. We both looked at each other, then around. The forest was still quiet, but the lack of radio and GPS seemed impossible. We were pretty sure there'd been some kind of glitch with the devices. Maybe the hill was messing with the signals. We decided to keep moving toward the tower, figuring cell phones might still work up top or that maybe the radios would come back. Once at the tower platform, we took a break and scanned the horizon. Nothing unusual. But then, as the sun started to lower, maybe 5 p.m. by then, Eric pointed up. "Hey, look at the sky. Do you see that?" I looked up. The stars were just coming out, a few twinkling in the blue twilight. But something was strange. They didn't look like the usual star pattern I knew. We'd both spent a good amount of time outdoors and had seen these constellations countless times. But tonight, the stars were shifting. Slowly, almost like someone was moving points of light around. At first, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks, maybe clouds moving or light pollution from the city glinting off the atmosphere. But Eric said, "No, look, they're rearranging. That cluster isn't Orion anymore. It's something else." I squinted, trying to make sense of the shapes. The stars seemed to realign themselves into unfamiliar geometric patterns. Nothing that matched any constellation I'd ever seen. I checked the time on my watch. No way it was a meteor shower or anything astronomical. I pulled out my phone to snap a photo, but the screen froze. I tried turning the camera off, then back on. Same thing. I started feeling that tight sensation in my chest, like a low hum of anxiety or confusion. We stayed up on the tower for another 20 minutes, watching the stars slowly drift into different shapes. Eric was quiet, just watching. Then I noticed something else. The forest below us was still. No rustling, no wind, no birds calling goodnight. Even the usual insect buzz was absent. We should have heard something, but there was nothing. I turned to Eric. "Did you feel that? Like the air? It's weirdly still." He nodded. "Yeah, like the whole place is holding its breath." I thought about suggesting we get down and head back, but the sun had dipped below the trees and the sky was darkening fast. The trail back was steep and tricky in fading light. But the thought of staying there didn't sit right either. We packed up and started down, using our compasses and memory for direction since GPS was dead. Halfway down, I glanced behind us and caught a faint glow near the tower, almost like a light source hovering just above the trees, but it wasn't moving like a flashlight or lantern. It was soft, white, and diffuse. I nudged Eric and pointed it out. He nodded but said, "Could be a plane or a drone." I shook my head. No sound, though. We stopped and listened. Nothing. We moved faster, trying to put some distance between us and the glow, but it seemed to stay in place. As we rounded the last bend before the trailhead, I checked my watch again. That's when I realized we'd lost time. We'd been on the trail for a solid hour, but the sun should have been fully set by now. Instead, it was still dusk, like the light had reset itself. We both noticed it, said it aloud, but neither of us had an answer. When we got back to the car, the GPS and radios suddenly kicked back on like nothing had happened. I looked over at Eric. He said, "Maybe we shouldn't come back here after dark." I didn't disagree. On the drive home, everything felt heavy, like the woods were closing behind us. That night, I kept checking the photos I managed to take earlier, but none showed the stars rearranging or the glow from the tower, just regular, blurry shots of the forest. I've told a few friends about it, but mostly as keep it to myself. I don't know what we saw up there, or what happened with the time, but every time I look at the stars now, I wonder if they're really where I think they are. We'd been out on Lake Almanor for a few hours, just my wife, Emily, and me, cruising around in our little motorboat. It was late August, early evening, that time when the sun's just dipping and the light softens, but it's not quite dark yet. The water was calm, the air warm but starting to cool, and the whole place was quiet, except for the hum of the motor and the occasional call of a loon somewhere out near the far shore. We usually didn't stay out this late, but Emily wanted to catch the sunset from the middle of the lake. She loves that calm, reflective time when everything slows down. I don't mind it either, especially after a hectic week at work. We weren't in any rush. We were about a mile out from the marina when she pointed at something floating not far from us. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, or maybe some plastic trash drifting on the water, but as we got closer, I realized it wasn't either. It was a soft glow, kind of like a pale greenish light, not bright like a flashlight, but enough to stand out against the darkening lake. "What the hell?" Emily said, her voice low, eyes fixed on the glow. I nodded, but kept the boat slow and steady. The light hovered maybe 3 feet above the water, and the shape was hard to make out, kind of round but irregular, like something translucent caught just under the surface. No shape I could identify. I pulled the throttle back, and we drifted closer, watching it pulse slowly, like a breathing light. Then, just as we got within 20 feet, the light started to sink. Emily leaned forward, her face tense but curious. Wait, is it going under? Yeah, I said, a little surprised myself. I looked all around to see if maybe it was attached to something. No buoy, no boat, no rope. Just that light, slipping slowly beneath the water. The weirdest part was what happened next. When it sank, there was no splash. Usually, even something small hitting the lake makes a noise, or at least some kind of ripple that breaks the surface sharply. But this time, it was like the water swallowed the light whole without a sound. The surface stayed still for a moment, and then a ripple spread out from the spot, slow and smooth, almost too perfect. Like it was radiating in silent waves rather than the usual messy, wind-driven ripples you expect on a lake. Emily frowned and grabbed the side of the boat. Did you see that? No splash, but the water moved like it was pushed from underneath or something. I was feeling a bit uneasy, but the place was so isolated and quiet, I thought maybe it was just some weird water current or an animal moving under the surface. I switched off the motor and reached for my flashlight, aiming it at the spot where the light disappeared. The water was dark and calm again, but the ripples kept spreading out, moving in slow circles, fading only after a good 30 seconds. We sat there in silence, watching. Then, out of nowhere, the engine sputtered and died. I tapped the throttle, but the motor just gave a little cough and went silent. Great, I thought. Out here, middle of the lake, at dusk with a dead motor. Emily reached for her phone, but of course, no signal. We were too far out and surrounded by dense pine forest. I tried the starter a few more times. Nothing. The sky was fading fast now, the last bit of sunset gone, leaving a bluish-gray gloom that made the lake feel colder than it was. Okay, I said, trying to keep calm. We'll have to row back. Emily nodded, pulling out the oars we keep on board for emergencies. As I started helping her get the oars in the water, I glanced back at the spot where the light had sunk. For a moment, I thought I saw something move just beneath the surface, like a shadow or shape passing by, but it was gone before I could be sure. I shook my head. It's probably just a fish or something. We started rowing toward shore, slow and steady, cutting through the quiet water. After a few minutes, Emily broke the silence. Mark, did you hear that? Hear what? That sound. I stopped rowing and listened. There was a low humming noise coming from the water itself, not the boat. It was faint, but definitely there, almost like a tone that vibrated beneath the surface. Yeah, I said, I hear it. It wasn't like a motor or any engine I knew. It was more consistent, a steady pitch that didn't change. We kept rowing, both of us glancing around nervously. As we got closer to the shore, the humming faded. When we finally reached the dock, I got out and pulled the boat in. The moment my feet hit solid ground, the noise stopped completely. Emily and I sat on the dock for a while, just staring at the water. I don't know what that was, she said quietly. Me neither. We loaded up the boat and drove home in silence. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. Not from the trees or the shore, but from beneath the water, or maybe the sky just above. I checked the boat and the motor the next day. Nothing wrong. No leaks, no clogs, no mechanical problems. It started right up, like nothing had happened. I thought about calling someone at the marine or the local ranger station, but what would I say? That I saw a glowing thing sink under the lake without a splash and the motor died right after? I didn't want to sound crazy. Weeks later, Emily and I went back to the lake. We didn't see anything strange. No glowing, no hum, no silent ripples. But sometimes when the wind is still and the dusk settles in, I think about that light sinking without a sound and the ripples spreading out like it was something alive or something watching. And I wonder if it's still there and just beneath the surface, waiting. We were camped about 15 miles outside of Black Butte, New Mexico, not too far from the edge of that restricted zone everyone in town sort of pretends doesn't exist. You can see the fences if you drive far enough off Highway 14, low and dusty, with rusted signs that say things like no entry and US government property. The kind of place that doesn't bother with cameras because nobody's supposed to be out there anyway. My girlfriend, Lacey, had found the campsite on some overlanding forum. Flat patch near an arroyo, good for stargazing, little risk of traffic. We drove out in my old Tacoma with the tent in the truck bed, her dog Hubble in the back seat. He's a blue heeler mix with a busted left ear and a weird habit of staring off into empty space sometimes. We got there just before sunset. Mid-June, hot even after dark. Dry wind, no clouds. We cooked dinner on the little propane burner, beans and tortillas, nothing fancy. No phone signal out there, but that's part of why we went. Just us, the dog, and the quiet. Around 10:30, we climbed up into the tent. You could still hear the metal popping from the truck cooling down. Hubble curled up between us on top of the sleeping bags. The plan was to wake up early and hike along one of the dry riverbeds before it got too hot. I remember waking up once in the night to take a piss. Stars were still out. Sky was so clear it looked fake, like paper with holes punched through it. I stood behind the truck to get some cover from the wind, but it was dead still, just warm and quiet and open in every direction. I didn't notice anything weird then. The weird stuff started when we woke up. It was maybe 6:30 in the morning. Sky already turning white-blue, not a cloud anywhere. I unzipped the tent and noticed right away that the truck doors were open. All four of them. Just wide open, like someone had parked and forgotten to close anything. Driver, passenger, both rear doors. At first I figured I'd somehow forgotten to lock them, and maybe the wind caught one and it swung the others open, but there was no wind. And even if I'd left one door ajar, I definitely hadn't left all four wide open like that. Lacey leaned over me and said, "Did you get something from the truck last night?" I said no. She shook her head slowly and pulled on her boots. Hubble jumped down and started pacing circles in the dirt near the front bumper, nose low to the ground. Then he just stopped, sat, and stared at the open passenger door like he was waiting for something to come out of it. I walked around the truck. Seats were untouched, nothing missing. Cooler was still full, glove box closed, nothing torn or broken. The keys were still in my bag in the tent. But the ground around the truck was completely smooth, just our footprints from the day before. No fresh prints, no tire marks, no drag marks, no animal tracks, nothing. It was sand, not hard-packed dirt. Anything heavier than a rabbit would have left something. Even Hubble's prints from that morning stood out clear. But around the truck, nothing. Lacey checked the cooler and said, "Even the food's still here." We both just stood there for a while. I kept looking up like I expected to see something above us. A drone, a balloon, whatever. There was nothing, just that still blue sky. We broke camp pretty fast after that, didn't even cook breakfast, I just wanted to get moving. But as I was rolling up the tent, I saw something off in the distance, maybe 200 yards east near the edge of the arroyo. There was a post sticking out of the sand. Just a wooden fence post, maybe 3 feet high. Looked like part of an old ranch line or something. I walked over to check it out. It wasn't old. The wood looked new, like freshly cut, no weathering, no cracks, and it was stuck in the ground at an angle, like it had been jammed in quick. At the top, someone had wrapped a strip of what looked like tin foil around it. Not commercial foil, rough cut, like it had been torn by hand. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it for a minute and then walked back. We left by 7:15. Halfway back to the highway, Lacey asked if I remembered hearing anything in the night. I said no, but she said she'd woken up once. Thought she heard a humming sound. Said it was really low, like far-off machinery or an electrical transformer buzzing. She thought it was just in her head, so she didn't wake me. Hubble wouldn't settle down the whole drive home. Usually he sleeps the second we start moving, but this time he sat upright in the back seat, staring out the window. Every so often he'd let out this low, short whine, just one at a time. Back in town, we checked the truck. Doors worked fine. Locks clicked, no issues with the latches, nothing missing, not even the gas. But the dome light was burned out. Not dim, burned. The little plastic cover over the bulb was cracked down the middle, and the bulb itself had this faint black smear inside it, like it had popped. That night we slept at Lacey's place. Around 2 a.m., Hubble started pacing. He'd walk from the front door to the bedroom, then back again. No barking, just quiet and tense. I looked through the blinds expecting to see a raccoon or something, but there was nothing. When I came back from the window, I noticed something else. The backpack I'd brought on the trip, same one that had the keys in it, was sitting in the corner. It had a line of sand across the top zipper. Just one line, like someone had dragged a finger through fine dirt and traced it across the fabric. I hadn't taken it out since we got back. It had stayed zipped and untouched by the door. I didn't say anything to Lacey, just brushed the sand off and shoved the pack in the closet. A couple days later, I drove by the entrance to that old service road we'd used to get to the campsite. There were fresh tire tracks there. Not ours, these were wider, deeper. Like a heavier vehicle had gone in after us. I didn't follow them. We haven't camped in that area since. I was driving through eastern Montana on a late summer night, hauling a load from Seattle to Minneapolis. It was one of those stretches of highway where there's barely any traffic, no towns for miles, just long roads lined by flat fields and the occasional stand of scrubby trees. The sky was mostly clear, but there were some thin clouds drifting low, and the moon was just a sliver, barely lighting up the land. I'd been on the road since early afternoon, and by about 11:30 p.m. I was feeling that familiar creeping tiredness that comes from hours of nothing but highway and the drone of the engine. My dog, Jeb, was curled up in the bunk, snoozing. He's an older mutt, mostly black with a big white patch on his chest. He doesn't bark much, but he's good company for the lonely miles. I glanced over at the GPS and saw I had about 300 miles left to my next stop, a rest area just outside Miles City. I figured I'd keep pushing a bit longer, but then, out of nowhere, a flash lit up the sky ahead. Not lightning, no thunder, and the clouds didn't look stormy, but a sudden, bright white light, almost like a camera flash, but way bigger and more intense, right over the horizon. I slammed on the brakes, pulled off the highway onto the gravel shoulder, and cut the engine. Jeb woke up, looking around groggily, but didn't make a sound. I sat there for a minute, eyes on the sky. The flash didn't repeat, just that one sharp burst of light, then silence. I figured maybe it was a plane or a helicopter with a spotlight, but there was nothing else up there. No sound, no blinking red lights like on aircraft. The radio was dead quiet. I checked the gauges, everything normal. The hum of the engine gone, just the quiet of the night. I leaned back in my seat, thinking maybe I'd just rest my eyes for a bit. That's when I noticed something strange. The usual buzz of insects was missing. Even the wind that usually rustled the dry grass was dead, just still air and that eerie silence. Jeb curled up again, resting his head on my knee. I don't know how long I was there. I checked the clock, 1:15 a.m. I figured I must have been sitting for about 20 minutes. I started the engine, pulled back onto the highway, and continued driving. The road was empty, the sky clear, but something about the whole situation felt off. I stopped at the rest area around 3 a.m. I filled up on coffee, stretched my legs, let Jeb run around the lot for a bit. When I looked at the GPS log later, that's when the weird part hit me. According to the tracker, I hadn't just sat there for 20 minutes like I thought. The truck was completely still for 1 hour and 47 minutes. I stared at the screen, confused. I swear I was only parked for less than half an hour, maybe 20 minutes tops. I checked the time on my phone. It matched the truck's clock now, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. I called a buddy of mine, Nate, who's also a trucker and pretty tech savvy. I asked if the GPS could have glitched or lost signal. He said it was unlikely. The satellite coverage in that area was good, and the device I used was reliable. I went back over everything I could remember from that stretch. The flash, the silence, the feeling that time had slipped somehow. There was no radio chatter, no other vehicles, nothing. I didn't see any other lights, no planes, no cars on the shoulder. The sky was dark, except for a scattering of stars, and the flash was the only bright thing that had happened. On the drive after the rest stop, I kept glancing at the GPS. The time log was clear. I'd been stopped, sitting still, almost 2 hours longer than I thought. That night in the motel, Jeb wouldn't stop pacing. He looked tense, ears twitching toward the window, and he kept low growling at the dark outside. I couldn't sleep either. The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I got. No one else on the road had seen anything. The other truckers I talked to said it was a normal night. I don't know what happened out there, but something about that flash and the time I lost makes me wonder if I wasn't alone. I'm sticking to the logs and the memory I have. I stopped the truck. I saw a flash. I sat there. But how does almost 2 hours disappear when I remember barely 20 minutes? Jeb and I keep our runs, but I avoid that stretch of highway now. Maybe that's for the best. I've always liked night fishing. It's quiet, mostly just me, my rod, and the lake under the stars. My name's Tom Granger, and I live out near Lake Woodson, a small, pretty ordinary place in northern Wisconsin. Nothing fancy about it, just a bunch of trees, some cabins, and a lake that's usually calm and dark at night. My dog, Whiskey, a scruffy mutt with a lazy streak, usually comes with me. He's not much of a swimmer, but loves sitting on the dock and watching the water. One Friday night in early September, the air was cool, but still felt heavy, like the kind of night right before a storm rolls in. Whiskey and I headed down to the lake around 9:30 p.m., planning to fish for a few hours before calling it. The sky was clear at first, full of stars, but the wind had picked up a little, just enough to rustle the leaves and make the water's surface shimmer softly. We set up on the far end of the dock, the one that sticks out a little over the deepest part of the lake. The water there's usually still, even when it's windy, because the trees on the far shore block the worst of the gusts. I cast my line and settled in with a thermos of coffee. Whiskey curled up at my feet, eyes half closed. The night was peaceful, nothing but the occasional splash from a fish or the distant call of an owl. Then, about an hour in, I noticed something weird. At first, it was just a faint glow near the water's surface, about 30 feet from the dock. It looked like a light, but it was too dim and kind of diffuse, like someone had dropped a glow stick under the water and it was just barely visible through the dark. I leaned forward to get a better look. The glow was pale greenish white and didn't flicker or change shape. What caught me off guard was that the water around it wasn't disturbed at all. Usually, if something's floating or moving near the surface, there's some ripple or splash. This was perfectly still, like the light was just hovering there, no contact with the water at all. I figured maybe it was some kind of fish with bioluminescence or a reflection of something on the shore. I stood up and shone my flashlight toward it. The beam sliced through the dark, but the glow stayed the same, no reaction, no movement. Whiskey perked up, ears twitching, staring at the same spot. Then the light started to rise. Slowly at first, just inches above the water, then faster, moving upward like a bubble escaping from the lake bed. Except it wasn't a bubble, it was smooth, round, and glowed brighter as it rose. The water beneath it remained perfectly flat, no ripples, no waves, nothing. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, half expecting it to vanish or be some trick of the light. But it kept going, rising maybe 10 feet above the surface, then drifted horizontally, moving away from the dock and across the sky. I dropped my rod and grabbed my phone, fumbling to get the camera app open, but as soon as I focused on the glowing orb, the screen dimmed and then went black. I tried again, but it stayed that way, dead, as if the phone was refusing to record or even see the light. Whiskey growled low, his hackles up, and I felt a chill despite the mild air. The glow kept drifting silently, smooth and steady, with no sound or disturbance at all. It moved in a slow arc, like it was following some invisible path across the stars. I followed it with my eyes, heart beating a little faster until it just disappeared. Not with a flash or a burst, just faded gently, like turning off a lamp. The whole thing lasted maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but after it vanished, the lake was still dead calm. No ripples, no waves, nothing to suggest anything had moved through the water or sky. I sat back down on the dock trying to process what I'd just seen. Whiskey stayed close, still tense, ears swiveling toward the trees in the lake. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping the camera would come back on, but it stayed black. The thermos was cold now, my hands shaking a little. For the rest of the night, I kept watching the sky, but nothing else showed up. No lights, no sounds, no weird reflections, just the normal quiet, the crickets, the wind in the trees, the occasional splash far off. The next morning, I told my neighbor Greg about it. He's a fisherman too, knows the lake like the back of his hand. Greg said he hadn't seen anything strange, but he didn't dismiss me. Just said, sometimes the lake has its mysteries, and that part of the world tends to mess with your head after dark. Over the next few days, I checked with a couple of other locals. A woman named Elsie mentioned seeing a faint light near the lake around the same time, but she thought it was just a flashlight or maybe some kids messing around. No one else saw anything like I did. I tried to find some explanation. Bioluminescent algae? It doesn't happen in freshwater lakes around here. Reflection from a boat? No boats were out that night. Fishing lights? None on the lake at all. No airplanes or helicopters in the area either. What stuck with me was the water, how it never moved, even though something was clearly coming up from it and floating away. The glow was there, bright and steady, but the lake didn't react like it should. Since then, I've gone back to the lake a few times, sometimes with whiskey, sometimes alone. The night I saw the light, the air was different somehow, thicker, heavier. I can't explain it. Other nights, it's just normal, calm, quiet. My phone still works fine now. No blackouts or dead screens. And whiskey? He's never liked going out on the dock after dark since that night. He stays close to shore and doesn't want to look out over the water. I don't know what that light was. I'm not sure I want to. It didn't hurt anyone, didn't say or do anything. Just showed up, drifted across the sky, and disappeared without a trace. But sometimes when the wind's right and the lake is perfectly still, I swear I catch a faint glow out there. Just under the surface, waiting. It was a Thursday morning, early September. I remember that because we'd had a string of hot days and finally got a cool front that rolled in overnight. I got up around 6, same as always, made coffee, fed the dogs, and headed out to check the pasture before starting on the fencing repair I'd been putting off. We've got about 40 acres, mostly pasture, some woods near the south end, and it's just me and my wife out here. She was in town visiting her sister that week, so I was by myself. I noticed it right away, maybe 50 yards from the back gate. A square, perfectly square, burned into the grass. It was probably 10 feet by 10 feet. Sharp corners, straight lines. The grass inside it was brittle, dead looking, not blackened or charred, just dry, like it had been microwaved. Outside the square, everything was normal, green, soft, dew-covered. But inside that square, it looked like mid-July after a month of no rain. I walked around it twice. No tracks, no tire marks, no footprints. I bent down and touched the grass. It crumbled under my fingers. Not ashes, just dead. And there was this smell, like ozone. Or static. I don't know how to describe it exactly, almost metallic. Not strong, but it lingered. I looked up. Clear sky. No sign of a storm. We hadn't had lightning. I would have heard it, and the dogs would have raised hell. I went back to the barn, grabbed a shovel, and tried to dig up a bit of the dirt from the middle. It came up dry, and we guessed but not scorched. No heat, no soot. Just dry soil. Almost powdery. I figured maybe a crop duster dumped something by accident, but we don't get planes out here often, and there wasn't any residue or chemical smell, just that faint ozone scent. Later that day, I told my neighbor Joe about it. He's got land just west of ours, and he came by to look. He stood there a while, chewing on a toothpick, then asked if I'd been burning anything. I told him no. He kicked at the edge of the square with his boot, then shrugged and said it was probably kids with a drone and some kind of prank. But it wasn't just the square that got to me. That night, around 2 a.m., the dogs started whining. Not barking, whining. I got up, checked the back porch. They were both standing at the door, ears back, tails down. Usually they bark at anything that moves, raccoons, coyotes, wind. But they just stood there, quiet, eyes on the field. I stepped outside and listened. Nothing. No wind, no bugs, no distant trucks. Just silence, the kind that feels heavy. I didn't have a flashlight on me, but the moon was bright enough to see. I looked out toward the pasture. That square was still there, just darker now in the moonlight. Nothing moved. I waited maybe 5 minutes, then went back inside. The dogs followed and curled up under the kitchen table. Next morning, I checked again. Still there. Still dry. I brought a camera out and took a few pictures, but they didn't show much, just a brown square in the grass. Nothing weird unless you already knew what to look for. That day I noticed something else. My phone battery died by noon. It was at 80% in the morning. I hadn't used it except to check the time and take those pictures. I plugged it in, but it charged slower than usual. The wall clock in the kitchen was 10 minutes off, too. Thought maybe the battery was low, but it was fine when I checked it. That night, I brought a lawn chair out to the edge of the pasture, just to see if anything happened. Around 10, I started seeing small lights, way off in the distance, moving low to the ground. Not headlights, no roads out that direction. Just pasture and woods. They weren't bright. Just little pulses, like someone flicking a lighter over and over. But they moved, side to side, up and down. Too smooth to be people walking with flashlights. No sound. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes before they faded. Dogs didn't bark. Whole time, they just sat at the fence, staring. 2 days later, the square was still there. The grass hadn't changed. Still brittle, still dry. But the area around it started to look different. I don't know how to explain it. Just a subtle shift. The grass outside the square grew faster than usual. Greener, healthier. Like the soil got a boost. But inside, it stayed dead. I brought out a moisture meter I use for the hay fields. Readings inside the square were low, almost zero. Just outside the square, normal, even a little higher than normal in some spots. That afternoon, while I was out walking the fence line, I heard a hum. Not loud. Low, almost like a diesel engine idling far off, but steady. I turned expecting to see a truck, but there was nothing. No dust trails, no headlights. I stood still for a minute, and the hum just stopped, like someone flipped a switch. When I got back to the barn, the power was out. Only for a few seconds, but it flicked off and on. The radio reset, the electric fence controller blinked like it had lost connection. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like someone was outside. I kept getting up, checking the windows. Nothing, but the dogs paced, back and forth. No barking, just pacing. Around 3 a.m., I looked out the bedroom window and saw the square glowing. Not bright, just a soft, faint shimmer, like heat rising off pavement again, but steadier. I went out onto the porch with my flashlight. When I shined it on the square, the shimmer stopped. Grass still looked the same. I walked out to it, slow. Dogs stayed back at the house. I crouched down, touched the dirt again. Still dry, but the air felt warmer over it. Not hot, just a few degrees different, like standing near a heating vent. I stayed there for a while, just listening. Again, nothing. No wind, no bugs, just quiet. Next morning, the shimmer was gone. No trace of it. But now the square looked cleaner, like something had sucked the moisture and color out completely. I left it alone after that. Stopped walking the dogs near it. Stopped talking about it. A week later, it rained. Good, steady rain all afternoon. Everywhere on the property got soaked, except that square. I went out after the storm passed and checked. The ground around it was muddy, grass wet, but inside the square, dry as ever. The grass still hasn't grown back. It's been months. Sometimes at night I still hear that hum, just for a few seconds, then gone. I don't go out when I hear it, neither do the dogs. We just wait, then it stops. I've never seen anything leave tracks. Nothing flies overhead, but that square is still out there and it's not fading. I was going through some trail camera footage one evening after my shift. It was routine, checking for signs of wildlife activity, tracking deer movements, stuff like that. The cameras were set up along a popular hiking trail in the national park where I worked as a ranger. Nothing out of the ordinary, usually. But this time, something caught my eye. The camera had taken a series of photos at night, around 2:30 a.m. I'd seen footage from that area plenty of times before, mostly deer, raccoons, the occasional coyote. But this time, the images didn't look right. 3 consecutive shots were completely black. No animals, no light, nothing visible at all, just pure blackness. At first, I thought maybe the camera had malfunctioned or the memory card was damaged. I checked the timestamps. The first black photo was at 2:31:07 a.m., the second at 2:31:22, and the third at 2:31:37. so about 15 seconds apart, the same as usual, but all three were just solid black. That wasn't all. When I tried to play the audio recording that came with the photos, the sound file was corrupted. Every time it got to those moments, the audio filled with a series of loud, rhythmic clicks. Not like animal noises or static interference. These clicks were steady, almost like a pattern. I replayed the clip several times, trying to make sense of it. The clicks were consistent in a sequence. Click, 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 repeated over and over for about a minute. It was so regular it didn't sound random at all. But there was no other sound mixed in, no wind, no footsteps, nothing else. I thought maybe something had tampered with the camera or the memory card, but there was no sign of physical damage. The camera was still firmly attached to the tree branch where we'd installed it a month earlier. The batteries were fine too. I decided to head out there the next morning to check the spot in person. The trail was quiet, early spring, not many visitors yet. When I got to the exact location, the tree the camera was on looked normal. No scratches, no marks, nothing that suggested interference. The area around it was undisturbed, no footprints or broken branches that would suggest someone had been messing with the equipment. I felt a little uneasy standing there. The woods were thick, but the morning sun was filtering through the trees, making everything look calm. Still, that blackness in the photos and those clicks stuck with me. Over the next few days, I reviewed footage from other cameras nearby, trying to find anything strange. Nothing. Every other photo and sound file looked normal. Animals moving about, wind rustling leaves, distant bird calls. No more black images or weird clicks. Then, about a week later, I was back in the office when I got a call from one of the other rangers. He told me there'd been some strange reports from hikers on that same trail late at night. People said they heard weird noises, rhythmic tapping or clicking sounds coming from deep in the woods. No one had seen anything, just the noises. I didn't want to tell him about the camera footage just yet. I wasn't sure if it was connected or if someone was pulling his leg, but the timing was too close to ignore. That night, I decided to hike the trail myself, starting around midnight. I brought a flashlight, extra batteries, and my radio. The forest was quiet except for my footsteps on the dirt path and the occasional distant owl hoot. About halfway down the trail, I thought I heard something. At first, I wasn't sure, maybe the wind or branches scraping together. But then the sound came again, clear and steady. Click, 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 click. It was faint, coming from off the trail, somewhere near a cluster of tall pines. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried through the still air like a slow, patterned tapping. I stopped walking, turned off my flashlight, and listened. The clicks repeated, evenly spaced. I swung my beam around the trees, trying to find the source. Nothing visible. No animals. No people. The clicking stopped after a minute. I waited a little longer, but everything else was silent again. I didn't want to push further into the woods in the dark alone, so I turned back slowly, my heart picking up. As I walked, I felt like I was being watched. But whenever I glanced over my shoulder, there was nothing. The rest of the hike back to the ranger station was uneventful. I checked the radio. No signals or chatter except static. When I got back, I told the other rangers about the clicks. No one had any explanation. Some joked about woodpeckers or maybe some kind of animal behavior we hadn't seen before. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else. The next day, I looked at the camera footage again. The 3 black photos were still on the memory card, surrounded by normal images. I zoomed in on the photos before and after. The one before showed a blurry shape near the edge of the frame, but it was too dark and out of focus to tell what it was. The one after the black shots was a normal night scene, empty trail, some branches, nothing unusual. I ran the audio through a basic spectrogram program, hoping to find some hidden pattern or frequency. The clicks showed as clear spikes at regular intervals, but nothing else unusual. I tried to get a specialist to analyze the sound, but nobody I contacted could identify it. They said it didn't match any known animal sounds or equipment interference. After a few weeks, I stopped getting reports from hikers, and the trail returned to normal. The clicks never happened again during my shifts, but sometimes when I'm reviewing footage late at night or walking those trails alone, I swear I can hear a faint clink in the distance. Not loud, just enough to make me turn my head. I've kept the camera and the footage stored away in my office. Every so often, I look at those 3 black photos and listen to that corrupted sound file, hoping to find a clue I missed. I don't know what caused it or what was out there that night. All I know is that for a few minutes in the middle of the night, something was there. Something that didn't show up on the images, but left a sound that didn't belong. It was the second morning of our trip, just after dawn. Me and Nate had gotten to the ridge around 5:30 before the sun really started to show. It was cold but not miserable, maybe mid-30s, and the woods were still damp from the frost overnight. We were hunting elk, but we hadn't seen much the day before, so we moved a little farther east toward the open timber. We weren't talking much, just walking slow, keeping an eye on the ground, looking for fresh sign. I remember the light filtering through the branches, that gray-blue color before it turns golden. I was about 20 feet behind Nate when I saw him stop suddenly. He held his hand out without turning, real slow, palm down. That was our usual signal to freeze. I stopped and looked past him, and about 30 yards out in a patch of brush just off a narrow trail was a deer. A doe. Nothing special about it, not the animal we were after, obviously, but something was weird right away. It was just standing there, one leg raised like it had paused mid-step. Not twitching, not flicking its ears, totally still. Its head was tilted slightly up, not looking at us, looking above us. Nate stayed frozen, and I didn't move either. We watched it for maybe 10 seconds, maybe more. It didn't blink, it didn't twitch, just stared straight up. Then I looked up too. At first I didn't see anything. The sky was mostly clear, a few wisps of cloud catching early sunlight. But right above the tree line, a little ways past where the deer was looking, there was this shape. It wasn't lit up or glowing or anything like that. It was just black, perfectly black, and not shaped like a bird or a plane or even a drone. It was more like a wedge, not sharp, not pointed, just this black triangle floating up there. Still, no movement, no sound, and it was low enough that if it had made noise, we would have heard it. No wind, no leaves rustling, just dead quiet. I remember thinking maybe it was some weird shadow or a weird cloud formation, but it didn't move. It didn't match anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't blending in either. It actually blocked the stars behind it. Like, if you looked at the patch of sky just to the left or right, you could see the stars clearly. But where this thing was, it was just void. I looked back at the deer. Still frozen. Same raised hoof. Still staring upward. Nate turned his head slightly and whispered, "You see that?" I nodded, but I don't think he saw me. Neither of us moved for a while. I started to notice this weird pressure in my ears, like altitude pressure, but we weren't anywhere near high enough for that. It didn't hurt, just felt like being underwater. It made me swallow a few times. Then the deer finally moved, all at once. It jerked its head back down, looked around like it'd just woken up, and bolted into the brush without even giving us a glance. That broke the moment somehow. Nate turned and gave me a look, like, "What the hell?" I looked back up. The shape was still there, but I think it had rotated slightly, like not spinning, just a very slow pivot, like the edge of it was turning away. Still no sound. We stood there for another minute, maybe 2, long enough for the light to change a little. Then it just wasn't there anymore. I didn't see it move. I didn't see it shrink or fade. I blinked and it was just gone. The stars behind it were back. We stayed out a few more hours that morning, but we didn't see anything. No elk, no deer, no birds. Even the squirrels were quiet. I remember Nate remarking how still everything felt, like the forest was holding its breath. Back at camp, we didn't really talk about it. We both kind of danced around it, like neither of us wanted to be the one to bring it up directly. I think we both were hoping it would seem less weird if we ignored it. That night, we heard something walking near the edge of camp. It wasn't close, but it was heavy enough to hear the crunch of twigs. Probably a moose, we told ourselves. We didn't go check. The next morning, we packed up early. We'd originally planned to stay through Sunday, but we both kind of mutually decided we'd seen enough. Nate just said, "Let's try a different area next time." On the drive out, maybe an hour after leaving camp, we saw another deer standing by the side of the road. Another doe. It was facing the tree line, not looking at us, not eating. just standing there, head slightly up, same posture. We passed it slow, didn't stop. Nate didn't say anything until we were another mile down the road. He just said, "It looked the same." And yeah, it did. We'd been at the cabin for a few days, just the three of us. Me, my wife, and our son, Jake. It's out in the middle of nowhere, really remote. No cell service, just the kind of place where you drive for miles through dense woods to get there. We liked it for the quiet, away from everything. The plan was to disconnect, relax, and let Jake run around without worry. The first couple of nights were normal, nothing weird. Just the usual sounds, crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional owl. But the third night, something happened that I've been trying to figure out ever since. We were sitting outside around the fire pit. Jake was roasting marshmallows, and my wife and I were just talking, sipping some coffee. The sky was clear, and the stars were bright because there's no light pollution out there. It was peaceful, exactly what we came for. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my wife pointed toward the trees on the far edge of the clearing and said, "What's that?" I looked where she was pointing, toward the thick line of firs and pines that bordered the cabin. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, slowly, a light appeared, a small, glowing sphere rising just above the treetops. It wasn't like any flashlight or lantern. It was smooth, perfectly round, and emitted a soft, steady light that was white but kind of bluish at the edges. The sphere moved up, inch by inch, about 50 feet above us, just hovering there. There was no noise, no buzzing, no humming, nothing. I swear I strained to hear something, but it was completely silent except for the crackling of the fire behind me. I blinked, thinking maybe I was seeing things. My wife looked just as confused, and Jake stopped mid-toast with his marshmallow, staring wide-eyed. The sphere didn't change shape or size, it just hung there, still. We didn't move or speak for maybe a minute. I felt my stomach knot up, not in a panic, but in that slow, creeping kind of unease, the kind where your body wants to run, but your mind is stuck trying to make sense of what it's seeing. Then, without warning, it shot straight up, like a bullet. I mean, really fast, faster than anything I've ever seen. It vanished into the sky in a blink, leaving no trail, no noise, nothing. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. We all just sat there, stunned. I looked at my watch. Only about 30 seconds had passed since it appeared. But something felt off, like time wasn't right. After a moment, Jake whispered, "Did you see that?" My wife nodded, but she looked pale. "What was that?" I had no answer. Later, inside the cabin, we tried to shake it off, but the weirdness didn't end that night. The next day, Jake found some strange marks in the dirt near the cabin's edge. They were circular, about 2 feet wide, like something had been pressed into the ground. No footprints, no signs of a person or animal dragging something, just these perfectly round indentations, spaced unevenly, leading toward the woods. We thought maybe a heavy branch fell or something, but the circles were too precise, and there was no broken wood around. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Something outside felt different. I went to the window and looked out. The forest was still, but in the distance, I saw a faint light flickering, like a glow behind the trees, too small and too steady to be a campfire. I kept watching, and it moved slowly along the tree line, just below the canopy, never breaking through the branches. It didn't blink or change color, just moved in this smooth, gliding way. I called my wife quietly, but when she looked, the light was gone. I thought maybe it was my imagination, but I didn't feel right going back to bed. By the third night, the air felt heavy, like something was watching. We all stayed close together, the fire burning brighter than before. Then, again, that sphere appeared. Same place, same silent rise above the trees. Only this time, it stayed longer, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I noticed it pulse gently, the light thickening and thinning in waves, almost like it was breathing. Jake whispered, "It's watching us." I wanted to say it wasn't, that it was just a weird light. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. When it finally shot up and disappeared again, my wife said, "Let's pack up tomorrow." We didn't talk much after that, just packed silently the next day. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the sphere again. But the sky was empty. I don't know what we saw or why it was there. But something about those nights made the woods feel less like home and more like a place you're not supposed to be. It's been months since then, and sometimes when it's quiet, I swear I still see a faint glow just beyond the trees outside my window.